If you think you are smart enough to look down on me, then you are smart enough to pay your own bills. My mother, Beatrice, screamed those words at me across the Sunday dinner table, her face twisted in a way I had not seen since I was a child. The silence that followed was deafening. My brother Marcus smirked, and my sister-in-law Brittany took a delicate sip of her wine, her eyes gleaming with satisfaction. I did not cry. I did not beg. I simply reached into my purse, pulled out the key to the house they were all sitting in, and placed it gently on the tablecloth. "Challenge accepted," I whispered. "Before I tell you what happened when the lights got cut off 2 days later, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever been the family doormat who finally decided to become a wall of fire." My name is Jasmine, and I am 35 years old. For the last 10 years, I have been the invisible engine keeping my family afloat in Atlanta. To the outside world, the Davis family was thriving. My mother, Beatrice, was the matriarch of our local church. My older brother, Marcus, was a self-proclaimed entrepreneur, constantly chasing the next big thing. And then there was me. To them, I was just Jasmine, the boring administrative assistant who wore off-rack suits and had no social life. What they did not know was that my boring job was actually a cover. I am a senior forensic accountant for one of the largest firms in the state, and I own a portfolio of investment properties across the city. But in my mother's house, my success was irrelevant because it did not look like theirs. The night everything changed started like every other Sunday. The air in the dining room was thick with the smell of pot roast and tension. I had arrived straight from the office wearing my charcoal gray pantsuit, exhausted from a 70-hour work week. Brittany, Marcus's wife, looked me up and down the moment I walked in. She was wearing a pastel dress that probably cost more than my first car, her blonde hair perfectly waved. "Oh, Jasmine," she said, her voice dripping with that fake sweetness that makes your teeth ache. "You are wearing that again. It is so brave of you not to care about fashion. I mean, I would be mortified to be seen in polyester, but you just own it." I took a breath and sat down. "It is wool blend, Brittany, and it is practical." Marcus laughed, his mouth full of cornbread. "Practical is just a nice word for cheap jaws. You need to step it up. Look at Brittany. That is what success looks like." I looked at Brittany, who had never worked a day in her life, and whose credit card bills I had secretly paid off 3 times last year just to keep the peace. I said nothing. I just wanted to eat and go home to my quiet apartment. But Marcus was not done. He cleared his throat and put on his business face, the one he used right before asking for money. "So look, sis, I have got this opportunity. It is huge. Cryptocurrency is the future, and my buddy has an in on a new coin launching next week. I just need $10,000 to get in on the ground floor. We are talking triple returns in a month." I cut a piece of roast beef. "No, Marcus." The table went still. Beatrice looked up from her plate. "Excuse me." I said no. I repeated, my voice steady. "I gave you 5,000 for the trucking business that never bought a truck. I gave you 3,000 for the t-shirt line that printed one shirt. I am not giving you $10,000 for magic internet money." Beatrice slammed her fork down. "How dare you? Your brother is trying to build a legacy. He is trying to provide for his family. And you, with your little secretarial job, you are going to sit there and hoard your pennies. You should be honored to help him. He is 38 years old, Mama," I said, finally looking her in the eye. "When does he help himself?" Brittany scoffed. "See, this is why you are single, Jasmine. You are so bitter. Just because Marcus has vision and you are happy being a worker drone does not mean you have to punish him." I felt the heat rising in my chest. "I paid the property tax on this house last month," I said. "I paid for the new roof last year. I pay the insurance on Marcus's car." "That is what family does," Beatrice yelled. "We help each other. But you act like you are better than us just because you save every dime. You are selfish, Jasmine. Selfish and cold." I looked around the table. I saw Marcus, the brother I had worshipped growing up, looking at me with pure entitlement. I saw Brittany, the outsider who had walked in and taken my place as the daughter my mother actually wanted. And I saw Beatrice, the woman who had taught me to be strong, using that strength against me. "I am not giving him the money," I said with finality. That is when Beatrice stood up. Her face was turning a shade of purple I had never seen. "If you are going to be this disrespectful in my house, then maybe you do not need to be here. You think you are so important because you pay a few bills. If you think you are smart enough to look down on us, then you are smart enough to pay your own bills and stay out of our business. Get out." The room seemed to spin for a second. Get out. This was the house my father built. The house I had poured hundreds of thousands of dollars into over the last decade to keep from foreclosure after he died. "You want me to leave?" I asked quietly. "I want you to go," Beatrice spat, "and take your negative energy with you. We do not need your little handouts. Marcus is going to be a millionaire, and you will be nothing." I stood up slowly. I picked up my napkin and folded it neatly next to my plate. I reached into my purse and pulled out the heavy brass key to the front door. The key I had used to let myself in to stock the fridge when they were broke. The key I used to come in and fix the boiler when it froze. I placed it on the table with a heavy clunk. "Challenge accepted," I said. My voice was ice cold. I grabbed my bag and walked to the door. "Jasmine, wait!" Marcus called out, probably realizing his cash cow was walking away. But Brittany put a hand on his arm and shook her head, smiling. "Let her go," she said. "She needs us more than we need her." I opened the front door and stepped out into the humid Georgia night. I did not slam the door. I closed it softly with the kind of finality that sounds like a coffin lid shutting. As I walked to my car, I pulled out my phone. I dialed the number for the power company, the water company, and the landscaping service. All accounts were in my name. "Cancel everything," I told the operator. "Effective immediately." I got into my car and looked back at the house one last time. The warm yellow light spilled out of the dining room window where my family was likely laughing at my expense. They thought they had won. They thought they had put me in my place. They had no idea that they were sitting in the dark, they just didn't know the lights had been cut yet. I put the car in drive and pulled away. For the first time in my life, I wasn't driving home crying. I was smiling. I did not drive aimlessly into the night. I had a destination, a sanctuary that my family knew nothing about because they had never cared enough to ask where I really went when I left their suffocating orbit. I drove to my small, unassuming apartment complex on the edge of town, the one I used as a decoy. To my mother and Marcus, this efficiency apartment was proof of my mediocrity, a sad little box for a sad little secretary. To me, it was a storage unit for my double life. I walked inside and did not even turn on the lights. I did not need to. I knew exactly where everything was because I had been preparing for this exodus for 2 years. I walked into the bedroom and knelt inside the closet. I pulled back the loose corner of the carpet and lifted the floorboard that sat just slightly unevenly. Beneath it lay a fireproof safe. The combination was the date my father died, the last day I had felt truly protected. The lock clicked open with a satisfying mechanical thud. Inside were the papers that defined my true worth. There were deeds to 3 commercial buildings in Midtown, a portfolio of stocks that had tripled in value since the tech boom, and the most important document of all, the deed to the house on Magnolia Street. The house my mother was currently sitting in, sipping wine and bad-mouthing me. She thought she owned it because she lived there. She forgot that when my father passed, the title had been transferred to a trust to protect it from creditors, a trust that I controlled. I placed the documents into my leather satchel. Next, I pulled out a suitcase from under the bed. It was already packed. It had been packed for months, filled with my high-end skincare, a few changes of clothes that were not polyester blends, and my passport. I zipped it up, slung the strap of my bag over my shoulder, and walked out of the decoy apartment for the last time. I left the key on the counter. The lease was up at the end of the month anyway. I walked past my sensible dented Honda Civic parked in the lot. That car was part of the costume. I walked 2 blocks over to a private, climate-controlled garage where I paid a premium for discretion. I punched in the code and the heavy metal door rolled up slowly. Gleaming under the fluorescent lights was my pride and joy, a phantom black Audi RS7 with a twin-turbo engine. My family thought I took the bus when my Honda broke down. They had no idea I spent my weekends driving a machine that cost more than Marcus's entire failed business portfolio. I threw my bag into the passenger seat, slid behind the leather steering wheel, and pressed the ignition. The engine roared to life, a deep guttural growl that vibrated through my chest. It sounded like freedom. I drove toward the city skyline, leaving the suburbs and the judgment behind. The lights of Atlanta blurred past me as I merged onto the highway. I was not going to a hotel. I was going home. My real home. I pulled up to the valet stand of the Obsidian Tower in Buckhead. The doorman, a kind man named Elias, who never asked questions, smiled as he opened my door. "Good evening, Miss Davis," he said. "It is good to have you back." I handed him the keys and walked through the marble lobby to the private elevator. I scanned my fob, and the doors whisked me up to the 34th floor. The penthouse was cool, silent, and smelled of white tea and thyme. It was a world away from the pot roast and mildew scent of my mother's house. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, a sea of glittering lights that seemed to bow at my feet. The furniture was modern Italian leather, sharp angles and clean lines. There was no clutter here, no ceramic figurines collecting dust, no guilt. I poured myself a glass of vintage Cabernet, the kind Brittany would pretend to know about but could never afford, and sat down at my glass desk. It was time to sever the final chords. I opened my laptop. The screen glowed to life, illuminating the dark room. I cracked my knuckles and navigated to the utility management portal. This was the digital nerve center of my family's comfort. For a decade, I had streamlined everything: the power, the water, the high-speed internet they used to stream movies while I worked, the cable package Marcus used to watch sports, the family cell phone plan. Everything was linked to my personal bank account set to autopay, so they never had to worry about a due date. They had forgotten that bills even existed because I had made them invisible. I logged in. The dashboard showed the current status of the account for the house on Magnolia Street. It was a sea of green check marks. Paid, paid, paid. I clicked on the electricity provider first. My cursor hovered over the Edit Payment Options button. I took a sip of wine. I thought about Marcus's smirk when he asked for $10,000. I thought about Brittany's fake concern for my wardrobe. I thought about my mother screaming that I was only smart enough to pay bills. She was right. I was very smart about bills. I clicked. A menu dropped down. I selected the option for autopay. I switched the toggle from on to off. A warning box popped up on the screen asking if I was sure. I clicked yes. Then I went a step further. I removed my credit card information completely from the file. I moved to the water company. Delete payment method. Confirm. I moved to the internet and cable provider. This one gave me a moment of pause, thinking about how Marcus would react when his game cut out. The thought made me smile. I canceled the recurring payment, but simply stopping future payments was not enough. The billing cycle had just closed yesterday. The system was currently processing the payment for the last month of usage, a scorching Georgia summer month where Beatrice kept the air conditioning at 65 degrees day and night. The bill was astronomical. It was currently sitting in a pending status, waiting for my bank to release the funds tomorrow morning. I logged into my bank portal. I found the pending transactions for the utility companies. I selected them all. Stop payment. The bank charged a fee for each stop payment request, a small price to pay for the message I was about to send. I went back to the power company's website. I refreshed the page. The status had changed from pending to past due. Because I had stopped the payment that was supposed to cover the previous 2 months of deferred billing, I had arranged the system instantly flagged the account as delinquent. High-risk delinquent. I watched the screen as the algorithm did its work. It recalculated the balance. It added late fees. It added a reconnection deposit requirement. And then a red banner appeared at the top of the dashboard. It was the digital equivalent of an eviction notice. I leaned back in my chair, the light from the screen reflecting in my eyes. The text was bold red and unforgiving. It read, "Service disconnection notice. Due to a reversed payment and outstanding balance exceeding the credit limit, electrical service is scheduled for immediate suspension." I moved my mouse to the button that said, "Acknowledge receipt." I did not hesitate. I did not flinch. I pressed the button. The screen refreshed one last time. A countdown timer appeared, cold and precise. Service will be terminated in 48 hours. I closed the laptop. I finished my wine. I walked to the window and looked out at the city, wondering if my mother was sleeping soundly, dreaming of the money she thought she had saved by kicking me out. She had 48 hours to figure out that she was not the matriarch of a dynasty, but a tenant in a house of cards, and I had just pulled the bottom card. 2 days later, the Georgia heat was a physical weight, pressing against the windows of the house on Magnolia Street. But inside, the air conditioning was humming a lullaby of artificial winter. It was a Saturday evening, and the house was buzzing with the frantic energy of people preparing to be seen. Upstairs in the master bathroom that she had claimed as her own personal salon, Brittany was standing in front of the vanity mirror, surrounded by a cloud of expensive hairspray and entitlement. She was preparing for a gala at the country club, a charity event she had not donated a dime to, but insisted on attending to maintain her image as a woman of status. She held a professional-grade blow-dryer in one hand and a ceramic round brush in the other, working through her blonde extensions with the focus of a surgeon. Downstairs, my brother Marcus was sprawled on the leather recliner that had been my father's favorite chair. He was shouting at the 60-inch television I had bought them for Christmas 3 years ago, his eyes locked on the screen as he navigated a high-stakes multiplayer match. He was so immersed in his virtual world that he did not notice the storm brewing outside or the silence that was about to descend. My mother, Beatrice, was in the kitchen inspecting the contents of the stainless steel refrigerator I had stocked just days before I left. She was humming a hymn, completely oblivious to the fact that she was standing in a house that was technically no longer powered by her daughter's generosity. And then it happened. It was not a dramatic explosion or a flicker of warning. It was a sudden, absolute death of electricity. The hum of the air conditioner cut out, leaving a hollow, ringing silence in its wake. The television screen went black, plunging the living room into the gray dimness of the early evening. The lights in the kitchen vanished. Upstairs, the roar of the blow-dryer died instantly, leaving Brittany standing in the dark with damp, half-styled hair. For a heartbeat, there was total silence. Then the house erupted. Marcus was the first to scream, his voice cracking with the rage of a man-child interrupted. "What the hell just happened? I was winning." He slammed the controller down on the table and lumbered up from the chair. "Ma, the power is out again." Upstairs, Brittany let out a shrill shriek that could have shattered glass. "Beatrice, I cannot see anything. My hair is wet and the gala starts in 2 hours. You need to fix this right now." Beatrice stood in the darkening kitchen, her hand still on the refrigerator door handle. She blinked, confused by the sudden interruption of her comfortable existence. She assumed, as she always did, that this was a minor inconvenience, a mistake that someone else would rectify immediately. She assumed it was a neighborhood outage, a transformer blown down the street. She walked to the window and peered through the blinds, expecting to see the entire street in darkness. Instead, she saw the streetlights flickering on. She saw the neighbor's porch lights glowing warmly. She saw the television flickering through the window of the house across the street. The darkness was not in the neighborhood. The darkness was only in the house on Magnolia Street. Panic began to set in, not the panic of danger, but the panic of discomfort. The Georgia humidity, sensing the weakness of the house, began to creep in through the vents. The temperature inside seemed to rise 10 degrees in a matter of minutes. In the kitchen, the refrigerator gave a shuddering clunk as its compressor died. Inside the freezer, the pint of artisanal gelato Brittany loved began its slow, weeping descent into a sugary puddle. Beatrice grabbed her cell phone and marched into the living room where Marcus was uselessly mashing buttons on the remote. "Marcus, go check the breaker box," she commanded, her voice trembling with indignation. "It must be a fuse." Marcus grumbled and used his phone flashlight to stumble into the garage. He flipped the main switch back and forth. Nothing. He checked the individual breakers. They were all in the on position. He came back inside, sweating already. "It is not the box, Ma. The meter is dead. They cut us off." "Cut us off." Beatrice laughed, a harsh, incredulous sound. "That is impossible. We have lived here for 30 years. We are on the priority list. I pay the bills every month." She did not pay the bills. She had not written a check for a utility bill in a decade. She simply saw the lights turn on and the water run and assumed it was the natural order of things. She dialed the number for the power company, her finger stabbing the screen with aggressive force. She put the phone on speaker so Marcus could hear her give the operator a piece of her mind. When the automated system finally connected her to a human being, Beatrice launched into her triad. "This is Beatrice Davis, and I demand to know why my power has been interrupted. I have a sick child in this house," she lied effortlessly, "and this is unacceptable. You will turn it back on immediately, or I will sue you for everything you have." The operator on the other end was calm, unmoved by the threats of a woman who had no leverage. "One moment, ma'am, let me pull up the account. Can you verify the address?" Beatrice gave it. "I see the account here," the operator said, her voice cool and professional. "Service was disconnected 45 minutes ago due to non-payment and a specific request to terminate service by the account holder." Beatrice froze. "The account holder is my husband, Otis Davis," she sputtered, invoking the name of a man who had been gone for years. The operator corrected her. "No, ma'am. The account holder listed is Jasmine Davis. The account is currently flagged for a returned payment of $640, and the automatic payment method was removed by the user 2 days ago." The user also digitally signed the disconnection notice acknowledging that service would be terminated. The silence in the living room was heavier than the heat. Brittany had come downstairs holding a battery-operated makeup mirror, looking like a ghost in the shadows. She stared at the phone. Marcus's mouth hung open. Beatrice felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. Jasmine. Her daughter. The invisible secretary. The girl she had mocked for her practical clothes and her lack of vision. Jasmine was the one who had kept the lights on. Jasmine was the one who kept the water running. Jasmine was the one who paid for the high-speed internet that fueled Marcus's delusions of grandeur. "But I thought," Beatrice stammered, her bluster evaporating into the stifling air. "I thought the pension covered it." "The pension," Marcus whispered. "Ma, the pension barely covers the groceries." The realization hit them all at once. The lifestyle they had been living, the comfort, the security, the arrogance, it had all been subsidized. They were not successful. They were parasites, and the host had just detached herself. Beatrice ended the call, her hand shaking. She looked at her family. The house was getting hotter. The food in the fridge was spoiling. They were sitting in the dark in a house they could not afford to power. "Call her," Marcus said, his voice tight with fear. "Call her and tell her to fix it. She is just throwing a tantrum. She will turn it back on. She always fixes it." Beatrice nodded. Of course. This was just Jasmine acting out. A little power play. She would scold her, tell her the point had been made, and demand she turn the electricity back on before the food ruined. She scrolled through her contacts and found Jasmine's name. She pressed call. Across town, in the serene, hushed atmosphere of the Azure Spa, Jasmine was lying on a heated massage table. She was wrapped in a plush white robe that felt like a cloud. Her skin glowed from a 90-minute facial, and a glass of cucumber water sat on the teak table beside her. Soft ambient music played in the background, masking the chaos of the city outside. Her phone buzzed on the table. She opened one eye. The screen lit up with the word "Mother." Jasmine smiled. She picked up the phone and swiped to answer. She did not say hello. She just brought the phone to her ear and listened. Jasmine Beatrice screamed into the receiver, her voice tinny and desperate. What have you done? The power is out. Brittany is crying. The food is melting. You need to call them right now and pay this bill. Do you hear me? This has gone too far. We are your family. You cannot just leave us in the dark. Jasmine took a sip of her cucumber water. She let the silence stretch out, savoring the sound of her mother's panic the way one savors a fine wine. She thought about the years of insults, the demands, the way they looked at her as if she were a servant. Beatrice was still yelling. Are you there? Answer me. You are smart enough to fix this, so fix it. Jasmine sat up slowly, swinging her legs over the edge of the massage table. Her voice was calm, smooth, and utterly devoid of sympathy. Hello, Mother, she said. I hear you are having some technical difficulties. Fix it, Jasmine Beatrice demanded. No, Jasmine said softly. I do not think I will. You told me on Sunday that if I was so smart, I should pay my own bills. You told me to get out. You told me you did not need my handouts. But we didn't know, Beatrice sputtered. We didn't know you paid for everything. That, Jasmine said, is because you never asked. You were too busy counting Marcus's imaginary millions to notice who was actually keeping the roof over your head. Jasmine, please, Marcus shouted from the background. Just pay it. Jasmine laughed, a low, genuine laugh. You wanted me to pay my own bills, Mother. Well, I just paid the bill for my facial and it was lovely. As for your bills, that sounds like a problem for the millionaire entrepreneur living on your couch. But what are we supposed to do? Beatrice cried. I suppose you will have to be realistic, Jasmine said, echoing her father's words from years ago. I am done paying for people who hate me. The account is in my name, so I have closed it. If you want lights, you will have to open your own account. Oh, and Mother, you might want to check the water too. I think that gets cut off in the morning. She pulled the phone away from her ear as Beatrice began to scream again. Jasmine pressed the red button ending the call. She blocked the number. Then she blocked Marcus. Then she blocked Brittany. She lay back down on the massage table and closed her eyes, breathing in the scent of eucalyptus and lavender. For the first time in her life, she was not worried about the dark. She was basking in the light. Good luck, she whispered to the empty room. Monday morning broke over the house on Magnolia Street with a vengeance. The sun was not a welcome guest, but an intruder beating down on a home that had lost its ability to fight back against the Georgia summer. Inside, the air was stagnant and heavy, smelling of sour milk and desperation. Brittany sat at the kitchen table, fanning herself with a fashion magazine, her face slick with sweat, and her carefully applied makeup threatening to slide right off. She had missed the gala on Saturday night because she refused to go out with frizzy hair, and now she was looking for someone to blame. Her eyes landed on Marcus, who was pacing the living room floor, his shirt unbuttoned to his navel, trying to find a cell signal that wasn't reliant on the Wi-Fi that had been cut off. You cannot just let her get away with this, Marcus. Brittany hissed, her voice cutting through the humid silence. She is humiliating us. She is sitting somewhere laughing while we rot in this heat. You are the man of the house now. You need to do something. Marcus stopped pacing. The heat had made him irritable, and the lack of video games had left him with nothing to do but stew in his own inadequacy. He wiped his forehead with the back of his hand. What do you want me to do, Brittany? She blocked my number. She blocked Ma. I cannot exactly force her to pay the bill. You can hit her where it hurts, Brittany said, her eyes narrowing. Her job. That little administrative assistant job she loves so much. She thinks she is so high and mighty with her secret bank accounts. Go down there. Go to that office she is always bragging about working at. Make a scene. Tell her boss what kind of person she really is. Tell them she abandons her elderly mother and steals from her family. If she loses that job, she will have to come crawling back to us. She will need us again. Marcus looked at his wife, and a slow grin spread across his face. It was a cruel plan, but it was the only leverage they had left. They still believed the lie Jasmine had let them believe for years. They thought she was a low-level clerk at a mid-sized accounting firm in the suburbs, a place called Miller and Associates. They thought she spent her days filing papers and fetching coffee for important people. They had no idea that Miller and Associates was just a shell company Jasmine used for her smaller real estate holdings. "I am going to do it," Marcus said, puffing out his chest. "I am going to teach her a lesson about respect." He grabbed his keys and marched out the door, ignoring the fact that the gas tank in his truck was hovering near empty, and the credit card he used to fill it was likely declined. He drove to the office building he had dropped Jasmine off at once or twice over the years when her car was in the shop. It was a modest brick building in a business park, quiet and unassuming. Marcus parked his truck diagonally across two spaces right in front of the entrance, wanting everyone to see him arrival. He slammed the door and stormed into the lobby. The reception area was cool and smelled of lemon polish. A young woman sat behind a high desk, typing quietly. She looked up as Marcus barged in, her smile polite but guarded. "Can I help you, sir?" she asked. "Yeah, you can help me." Marcus boomed, his voice echoing off the tile floors. "I am looking for Jasmine Davis. Tell her her brother is here and he is not happy." The receptionist blinked. "Do you have an appointment, sir?" "I do not need an appointment," Marcus spat. "I am family. Get her out here right now. I want everyone to know what she did." He turned to the two other people waiting in the lobby, a man in a suit and an elderly woman. "You know what she did. She cut the power to her own mother's house. She left us to rot in the heat while she ran off. She is a thief and a liar." "Sir, please lower your voice," the receptionist said, standing up. "This is a place of business." "I do not care about your business," Marcus yelled, walking up to the desk and slamming his hand down on the marble top. "I want her boss. I want to talk to whoever is in charge of this little secretary. I am going to get her fired today. Do you hear me? She is going to be out on the street." The receptionist stared at him for a long moment. Her expression shifted from alarm to confusion. She typed something into her computer. "Sir, we do not have a secretary named Jasmine Davis," she said calmly. "Do not lie to me," Marcus growled. "She has worked here for 10 years. She wears those ugly gray suits. She drives a beat-up Honda. Stop covering for her." The receptionist looked at the screen again and then back at Marcus. Her eyes widened slightly as if she was realizing something. "Wait, are you talking about Ms. Davis? As in Jasmine Davis, the senior strategic partner?" Marcus froze. "The partner? No. No, she is an admin. She files papers." The receptionist let out a short, dry laugh. "Sir, Jasmine Davis is not an admin. She owns a 30% stake in this firm. She is the head of the forensic accounting division. She does not fetch coffee. She audits Fortune 500 companies. And she certainly does not work in this satellite office." Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. "What are you talking about, Ms. Davis works out of the global headquarters in Buckhead." The receptionist continued, her voice taking on a tone of icy professionalism. "Her office is on the top floor. And frankly, sir, considering her billable rate is $800 an hour, I highly doubt she has time for whatever this is." $800 an hour. Marcus repeated the numbers swirling in his head. That was more than he had made in the last month combined. He tried to process the information. The gray suits, the Honda, the way she never talked about work. It had all been a disguise. She wasn't just doing better than them. She was in a different stratosphere. "You are lying," Marcus stammered, but the fire had gone out of his voice, replaced by a cold, creeping dread. "She is nothing. She is just Jasmine." The receptionist pressed a button under her desk. "I am not lying, sir, but you are trespassing. I have called security." Before Marcus could respond, two large men in uniforms appeared from the hallway. They did not look like the kind of security guards who asked nicely. They looked like the kind who handled problems. "Sir, you need to leave one of them," said, stepping into Marcus's personal space. "But she is my sister," Marcus whispered, his world tilting on its axis. "Not here." "She isn't," the guard said. He grabbed Marcus by the arm. His grip was like iron. Marcus tried to pull away, tried to regain some shred of dignity, but it was useless. He was marched across the lobby, his heels dragging on the polished floor, while the people he had tried to impress watched with disdain. They shoved him through the glass doors and onto the hot concrete sidewalk. "Stay off the property, sir, or we will call the police," the guard said, and then the doors slid shut, leaving him standing in the oppressive heat. Marcus stood there dazed. The AC from the building was gone, replaced by the heavy, humid air. He looked at his truck, the symbol of his fake success, and felt a wave of nausea. He had come to destroy her, and instead he had found out that she was untouchable. She was a giant, and he was just an insect buzzing at her ankles. He turned to walk to his truck, defeated. As he reached for the handle, a low rumble made him look up. Cruising down the street was a sleek black car, low to the ground and menacingly beautiful. It was an Audi RS7, the kind of car Marcus only saw in magazines. The windows were tinted dark, almost opaque, but as it passed, the sunlight hit the windshield just right. For a split second, Marcus saw the driver. She was wearing designer sunglasses, and her hair was blown out straight and sleek. She was not looking at him. She was looking straight ahead, her profile sharp and focused. She looked like power. She looked like money. It was Jasmine. She drove right past him, the engine purring a deep, throaty growl that vibrated in his bones. She did not slow down. She did not honk. She did not even turn her head to acknowledge the man standing on the curb, sweating in his cheap clothes next to his empty truck. She simply existed in a lane he could not even merge into. Marcus watched the taillights of the Audi disappear around the corner, heading toward the highway, heading toward Buckhead, heading toward a life he had never even imagined she had. He stood alone on the sidewalk, the heat radiating off the pavement, knowing that he had to go back to the dark, hot house and tell his mother and his wife that they had not just lost a daughter and a sister. They had lost the lottery, and they had torn up the winning ticket with their own hands. The physical darkness was one thing, but the financial darkness was a beast that hunted in the daylight. It arrived not with a bang, but with the soft, innocent thud of the mail carrier dropping a stack of envelopes onto the porch floor. For years I had intercepted this daily delivery. I had filtered out the threats and the demands, leaving only the wedding invitations and the church newsletters on the kitchen counter for my mother to open. I had been the firewall between my family and the reality of their expenses. Now the firewall was gone, and the virus was spreading. Tuesday brought the first wave of artillery. Beatrice sat at the kitchen table, which was sticky with humidity because the AC was still dead. She slid open a large white envelope with the county seal in the corner. Her hands shook as she unfolded the letter. It was the property tax bill. For a decade I had paid it quietly out of my year-end bonus, regarding it as rent for a home I never felt welcome in. Beatrice stared at the number. $4,200. It was due in 30 days. Beneath the total was a bold line of text stating that the account was already in arrears because I had canceled the scheduled payment just minutes before I left. Marcus walked in shirtless and sweating, holding another envelope he had found jammed in the mailbox. This one was from the Homeowners Association. He tossed it on the table. "They are threatening Aline Ma," he said, his voice dull. "They say we owe for the new community pool assessment and 6 months of back dues. They say the grass is too long. They say the paint is chipping. They say they are going to fine us $50 a day until it is fixed." Beatrice looked from the tax bill to the HOA letter. She looked at the ceiling where a water stain was beginning to spread because I had canceled the gutter cleaning service too. "How did she pay for all of this?" Beatrice whispered. "She is just a secretary. She is a partner." Marcus corrected, his voice bitter with the memory of his humiliation in the lobby. "She makes $800 an hour, Ma. She could pay this with her pocket change. But she is not paying it." Beatrice snapped, her fear turning back into anger. "She is trying to starve us out. Well, I will not let her. I have assets. I have things of value." She spent the next 2 days trying to liquidate the family legacy. She called an antique dealer to look at the dining room set she claimed was a 19th century original. The dealer, a man with tired eyes and a clipboard, walked through the hot house wiping sweat from his neck. He looked at the table. He looked at the china cabinet. He looked at the silver tea service Beatrice had polished for 40 years. "It is reproduction, ma'am," he said flatly. "Late 1980s. Mass-produced. The veneer is peeling. I can give you $200 for the lot if you help me load it." 200, Beatrice gasped, clutching her chest. "That set is worth thousands. It is worth what someone will pay," the dealer said, shrugging. "And nobody is buying brown furniture anymore." He left without the table. Beatrice sold her jewelry next. She took the diamond earrings my father had given her for their 25th anniversary to a pawn shop on the bad side of town. She expected 2,000. The broker gave her 300. It was barely enough to buy groceries and a few portable fans that just pushed the hot air around. The pressure turned the house into a pressure cooker. Brittany, who had been maintaining a facade of supportive daughter-in-law, began to crack. The heat melted her patience along with her makeup. She stopped pretending to help with the cooking. She stopped complimenting Beatrice. She started pacing the living room, her eyes darting around like a trapped animal. "This is ridiculous," she spat at Marcus on Thursday afternoon. "We are living like animals. I cannot even charge my phone. You told me your family had money, Marcus. You told me your mother was set for life." "She is set," Marcus defended weakly. "It is just a cash flow problem." Jasmine messed everything up. "Jasmine is the only one with a brain in this family," Brittany yelled. She got out. "She has a penthouse. And look at you. You are 38 years old, and you cannot even buy me a bag of ice because your card is declined. You are a loser, Marcus. A broke loser." Marcus flinched as if she had slapped him. He looked to his mother for support, but Beatrice was staring at the wall, counting pennies in her head. In the corner of the living room sat my father, Otis. For years he had been a ghost in his own house, a quiet man who let Beatrice run the show, who nodded and smiled and never made waves. He had watched me pay the bills. He had watched me fix the roof. He had watched them treat me like a servant, and he had said nothing because silence was the price of his peace. But the heat and the hunger had woken something up in him. While Beatrice was arguing with Brittany over who drank the last bottle of water, Otis picked up the landline. It was dead, of course. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a prepaid flip phone he kept for emergencies. He went into the sunroom and closed the door. His fingers trembled as he dialed my number. I was in a meeting with a client, a pharmaceutical CEO, when my phone buzzed. I saw the unknown number. I usually sent them to voicemail, but something told me to answer. "Hello?" I said, my voice professional and cold. "Jasmine." It was a whisper, rough and raspy. "It is your father." I held up a hand to my client, excusing myself. I walked to the window of my office, looking down at the ants crawling on the pavement 30 stories below. "Hello, Daddy," I said. "I am sorry," he said. The words came out in a rush, as if he was afraid he would run out of breath. "I am sorry I let them treat you that way. I am sorry I did not speak up. You were always the good one, Jasmine. You were always the one who took care of us." "It is a little late for that, Daddy," I said. "The lights are off." "I know," he said. "I know. I just wanted you to know that I am proud of you. Even if I never said it. You got out. You won. Don't come back here, baby. Don't let them drag you back down." Before I could answer, the door to the sunroom burst open. I heard Beatrice's voice, shrill and furious. "Who are you talking to, Otis? Give me that phone." "No." "Beatrice." Otis said, his voice surprisingly firm. "I am talking to my daughter. You are talking to the enemy," she screamed. There was a scuffle, a sound of plastic clattering against the floor, and then the line went dead. Beatrice had snatched the phone and likely smashed it. I looked at the black screen. It was the first time my father had defended me in 20 years, and it would likely be the last. I felt a twinge of sadness, but I crushed it. He had waited until the ship was sinking to try and save the captain. Back at the house on Magnolia Street, the mood had shifted from desperate to predatory. Brittany had watched the scene in the sunroom with narrow, calculating eyes. She realized that Marcus was useless. She realized that Beatrice was powerless. If she wanted to survive, if she wanted to maintain the lifestyle she felt she deserved, She needed a new angle. She needed leverage. She walked upstairs to the hallway. The door to my old bedroom was closed. It had been closed since the night I left. Beatrice had forbidden anyone from going in there as if it were a crime scene. Brittany opened the door. The room was sparse, clean, and empty. I had taken everything that mattered. Brittany walked in her heels, clicking on the hardwood. She opened the closet. Empty. She checked the dresser drawers. Empty. She got down on her knees and looked under the bed. Nothing. She stood up, frustrated. There had to be something. Jasmine was a hoarder of secrets. She had to have left a crumb. She went to the desk in the corner. It was a cheap particle board desk I had used since high school. I had cleared it out, but in my haste I had missed one thing. The bottom drawer was stuck. It had always been stuck off its track and jammed. I hadn't opened it in years. Brittany yanked on the handle. It didn't budge. She grabbed a metal letter opener from the top of the desk and jammed it into the crack, putting her weight into it. With a loud crack, the wood splintered and the drawer flew open. It was mostly empty, just some old dust bunnies and a few dried-up pens. But pushed all the way to the back, stuck between the drawer bottom and the frame, was a yellowed envelope. Brittany reached in and pulled it out. It was sealed, but the glue had dried and become brittle with age. She slid her finger under the flap and opened it. Inside was a small blue card. The edges were soft and worn. Brittany held it up to the window to catch the fading light. It was a Social Security card. But it wasn't just any card. It was Jasmine's original card from when she was a child, before she had requested a replacement years ago. And behind it, tucked into the fold, was a piece of paper with a list of numbers written in my teenage handwriting. Bank account numbers, routing numbers, the old custodial accounts my father had set up for me before he lost control of the finances. Accounts that were technically closed, but the data, the identity points, they were still valid. A slow, dark smile spread across Brittany's face. She looked at the name on the card. Jasmine Marie Davis. She looked at the Social Security number. 9 digits. 9 digits that unlocked credit scores, loans, and credit cards. Jasmine had cut them off. Jasmine had taken her money and run, but Jasmine had left her identity behind. Brittany tucked the card into her bra. She didn't need Marcus to invest in crypto. She didn't need Beatrice to sell antiques. She just needed a laptop and a lack of conscience. And Brittany had plenty of both. She walked out of the room, leaving the broken drawer hanging open like a mouth screaming in silence. Downstairs, the argument was still raging, but Brittany wasn't worried about the lights anymore. She was going to light up her own world, and she was going to use my name to do it. The air inside the house on Magnolia Street was thick enough to choke on, but for the first time in days, the atmosphere in the living room was not heavy with despair. It was electric with a criminal kind of hope. Brittany sat at the dining room table, her face illuminated by the blue glow of her laptop screen. She had tethered the computer to her phone's data connection, creating a lifeline to the digital world. Next to her, Marcus hovered like a moth drawn to a flame, his eyes wide and hungry, as he watched her fingers fly across the keyboard. "This is too easy," Brittany whispered, her voice trembling with excitement. "She still has excellent credit, Marcus. 790. She barely uses any of her available utilization. It is like a blank check waiting to be written." She was on the application page for the Obsidian Infinite card, an invite-only credit line reserved for the ultra-wealthy. It was the kind of card that made a heavy clink when you dropped it on a table, the kind of card that opened doors and silenced questions. Brittany typed in the Social Security number she had found in the envelope. She typed in Jasmine's full legal name. For the address, she hesitated for only a second before typing in the Magnolia Street address. After all, this was technically Jasmine's house. It was not a lie, Brittany told herself. It was just a correction of paperwork. She hit submit. The little wheel on the screen spun round and round. Marcus held his breath. "Congratulations. Your application has been approved. Your credit limit is $50,000. Your digital card is ready for immediate use." "We are back, baby," Marcus shouted, high-fiving the air. 50 grand. We can pay off the HOA. We can get the lights back on. No, Brittany said sharply, slapping his hand away. We are not using this for the light bill, Marcus. Think bigger. If we pay the power company, Jasmine will get a notification. She will know we are using her name. We need to be smarter. We need to use this for things she won't see immediately. Things we can sell if we need cash. But mostly we need to look like we are winning. We need to remind people who the Davis family is. In the doorway, Beatrice stood watching them. She held a battery-powered fan to her face, her church hat sitting crookedly on the table beside her. She had heard everything. She knew exactly what they were doing. She knew that using her daughter's identity to open a line of credit without her permission was a felony. It was fraud. It was theft. But then she thought about the upcoming Sunday service. She thought about Deaconess Williams, who had looked at her with pity when she saw Beatrice wearing the same dress 2 weeks in a row. She thought about the rumors circulating in the choir loft about the Davis family falling on hard times. The shame burned hotter than the Georgia sun. Jasmine had humiliated her. Jasmine had abandoned her. In Beatrice's mind, this was not theft. This was restitution. It was a tax Jasmine owed for the privilege of being raised in this house. Beatrice walked into the room. Her voice was steady and cool. "Make sure you buy me something nice for Sunday," she said. "I cannot be seen looking like a pauper." Brittany smiled a wolfish grin. "Don't worry, Ma. We are going shopping." They left the suffocating heat of the house and piled into Marcus's truck. They drove straight to Phipps Plaza, the most exclusive luxury mall in Atlanta. The moment they stepped through the glass doors, the blast of industrial air conditioning hit them like a blessing. They breathed it in, washing away the sweat and the smell of the stagnant house. They walked with their heads held high, fueled by the adrenaline of spending money that did not belong to them. They started at the electronics store. Brittany bought 2 new iPhones, the latest models with the maximum storage capacity. She added them to the digital wallet on her phone, tapping the terminal with a flourish. Approved. The sales clerk handed over the white bags with a smile, and Marcus puffed out his chest, feeling the rush of being a customer who mattered again. Next, they went to the jewelry store. Marcus had been eyeing a Tag Heuer watch for years, a symbol of the success he had never actually achieved. He pointed it out in the case. The salesman, sensing a commission, unlocked the cabinet. Marcus slid the heavy steel watch onto his wrist. It looked like power. It looked like validation. "I will take it," Marcus said. "And get my wife those diamond studs she is looking at. And get my mother a pearl brooch. Approved. Approved. Approved." They moved through the mall like locusts, devouring everything in their path. They went to Gucci, where Brittany bought a handbag that cost more than my first year of college tuition. She strutted out of the store, the bag swinging on her arm, erasing the memory of the dark, hot house she would have to return to. Beatrice got a new silk hat and a matching scarf, envisioning the look on Deaconess Williams' face when she walked into the sanctuary. By evening, they were exhausted but euphoric. They decided to cap off their spree with a dinner at the Capitol Grill. They ordered the most expensive steaks on the menu, accompanied by truffle fries and bottles of heavy red wine. They ate like kings, feasting on the carcass of my financial reputation. To us, Marcus toasted, raising his glass, his new watch glinting in the dim restaurant light. "To taking what is ours." "To family," Brittany added, clinking her glass against his. "And to Jasmine for finally being useful." Beatrice sipped her wine, her eyes glittering. She is going to be so angry when she finds out, she said, a small, cruel smile playing on her lips. But what can she do? It is her word against ours. We are her parents. We are her family. No court is going to send a mother to jail for using her daughter's credit. She owes us this. They laughed, chewing their steaks, oblivious to the digital breadcrumbs they were leaving with every swipe of the card. They thought they were invisible. They thought they were smart. They had forgotten who they were dealing with. 20 miles away, in a conference room encased in glass and steel, I was sitting across from Damon, my attorney. Damon was a shark in a bespoke suit, a man who specialized in complex financial litigation and fraud. On the table between us lay a stack of files thick with evidence I had been compiling for years. We were discussing the timeline for the foreclosure process on the Magnolia Street house and the restraining orders I planned to file. My phone was sitting face up on the mahogany table. It was set to silent, but the screen lit up with a notification. It was a push alert from my credit monitoring service, followed immediately by a text message from the fraud department of the bank. I stopped Damon mid-sentence. "One moment," I said, holding up a finger. I looked down at the screen. The text was simple and precise. Alert. Unusual activity detected on your credit profile. New account opened, Obsidian Infinite. Recent transaction $5,200 at Gucci Phipps Plaza. Recent transaction $3,800 at Tag Heuer. Recent transaction $800 at the Capitol Grill. Please reply yes if this was you, or no to report fraud. I stared at the numbers. They were staggering. In less than 6 hours, they had spent nearly $15,000. I looked at the location, Phipps Plaza. Of course, they had gone straight for the flashiest, most obvious targets. Damon watched me, his eyebrows raised. "Is everything all right, Jasmine?" I picked up the phone. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. It was the smile of a trap snapping shut. I had left that drawer in my old desk jammed for a reason. I had left that expired Social Security card and those old account numbers there like a piece of cheese in a mousetrap. I knew Brittany. I knew her greed. I knew that if pushed into a corner, she would not look for a job, she would look for a shortcut. I had handed them the rope, and they had just tied the noose. "Everything is perfect, Damon," I said, my voice calm and deadly. "I just got the notification I have been waiting for." "What notification?" Damon asked, leaning forward. "They took the bait," I said. "They just committed federal identity theft, credit card fraud, and conspiracy across state lines, since the bank is headquartered in Delaware. And they did it all on camera in high definition at the most surveilled mall in the city." I tapped the screen, replying no to the fraud alert. The bank's automated system immediately locked the account and triggered a police report protocol. I looked up at Damon, my eyes shining with victory. "They are eating a very expensive steak dinner right now," I said. "I hope they enjoy it. It is going to be their last meal as free citizens." Damon smiled, a sharp, predatory grin that matched my own. "Shall we call the detective now, or let them finish dessert?" "Let them finish," I said, leaning back in my chair. "I want them full and happy when the bill comes due. Because this time the bill isn't money. It is 5 to 10 years in a federal penitentiary." The air inside the house on Magnolia Street was thick enough to choke on, but for the first time in days, the atmosphere in the living room was not heavy with despair, but electric with a criminal kind of hope. As Brittany sat at the dining room table, her face illuminated by the blue glow of her laptop screen, while Marcus hovered like a moth drawn to a flame, watching her fingers fly across the keyboard. "This is too easy," Brittany whispered, her voice trembling with excitement, because Jasmine still had excellent credit, a score of 790, and barely any utilization, which made it feel like a blank check waiting to be written. She was on the application page for the Obsidian Infinite card, an invite-only credit line reserved for the ultra-wealthy, the kind of card that made a heavy clink when dropped on a table and silenced questions. Brittany typed in the Social Security number she had found in the envelope and typed in Jasmine's full legal name, and for the address, she hesitated for only a second before typing in the Magnolia Street address, because she reasoned this was technically Jasmine's house, so it was not a lie, just a correction of paperwork. She hit submit, and the little wheel on the screen spun round and round while Marcus held his breath until the screen flashed. "Congratulations, your application has been approved. Your credit limit is $50,000, and your digital card is ready for immediate use." "We are back, baby," Marcus shouted, high-fiving the air, thinking they could pay off the HOA and get the lights back on. But Brittany slapped his hand away sharply, saying no, because if they paid the power company, Jasmine would get a notification, and know they were using her name, so they needed to be smarter and use this for things she would not see immediately. things they could sell if they needed cash, but mostly they needed to look like they were winning and remind people who the Davis family was. In the doorway, Beatrice stood watching them holding a battery-powered fan to her face, her church hat sitting crookedly on the table beside her. And even though she heard everything and knew exactly what they were doing, and knew that using her daughter's identity to open a line of credit without permission was a felony fraud and theft, she thought about the upcoming Sunday service and Deaconess Williams looking at her with pity and the rumors circulating in the choir loft about the Davis family falling on hard times. The shame burned hotter than the Georgia sun, and in Beatrice's mind this was not theft, it was restitution, a tax Jasmine owed for the privilege of being raised in this house. So she walked into the room and said, "Make sure you buy me something nice for Sunday because I cannot be seen looking like a pauper." Brittany smiled a wolfish grin and said, "Do not worry, Ma, we are going shopping," and they left the suffocating heat of the house and piled into Marcus's truck, driving straight to Phipps Plaza, the most exclusive luxury mall in Atlanta, where the moment they stepped through the glass doors, the blast of industrial air conditioning hit them like a blessing, washing away the sweat and the smell of the stagnant house. They walked with their heads held high, fueled by the adrenaline of spending money that did not belong to them. Starting at the electronics store where Brittany bought 2 new iPhones, the latest models with maximum storage, adding them to the digital wallet on her phone, and tapping the terminal with a flourish until the sales clerk handed over the white bags with a smile, making Marcus puff out his chest, feeling the rush of being a customer who mattered again. Next, they went to the jewelry store where Marcus had been eyeing a Tag Heuer watch for years, a symbol of the success he had never actually achieved, and when he pointed it out, the salesman, sensing a commission, unlocked the cabinet, allowing Marcus to slide the heavy steel watch onto his wrist, where it looked like power and validation. So he said, "I will take it and get my wife those diamond studs she is looking at, and get my mother a pearl brooch." They moved through the mall like locusts, devouring everything in their path, going to Gucci, where Brittany bought a handbag that cost more than my first year of college tuition, strutting out of the store with the bag swinging on her arm, erasing the memory of the dark hot house while Beatrice got a new silk hat and a matching scarf, envisioning the look on Deaconess Williams' face when she walked into the sanctuary. By evening they were exhausted but euphoric, deciding to cap off their spree with a dinner at the Capitol Grill, ordering the most expensive steaks on the menu, accompanied by truffle fries and bottles of heavy red wine, eating like kings, feasting on the carcass of my financial reputation. To us, Marcus toasted, raising his glass, his new watch glinting in the dim restaurant light, to taking what is ours, while Brittany added to family and to Jasmine for finally being useful. Beatrice sipped her wine, her eyes glittering with a small, cruel smile playing on her lips, saying she is going to be so angry when she finds out. But what can she do? It is her word against ours. We are her parents and her family, and no court is going to send a mother to jail for using her daughter's credit because she owes us this. They laughed, chewing their steaks, oblivious to the digital breadcrumbs they were leaving with every swipe of the card, thinking they were invisible and smart, but forgetting who they were dealing with because 20 miles away, in a conference room encased in glass and steel, I was sitting across from Damon, my attorney, a shark in a bespoke suit specializing in complex financial litigation. On the table between us lay a stack of files, thick with evidence I had been compiling for years, as we discussed the timeline for the foreclosure process on the Magnolia Street house, and the restraining orders I planned to file. My phone was sitting face up on the mahogany table set to silent, but the screen lit up with a notification from my credit monitoring service, followed immediately by a text message from the fraud department of the bank, causing me to stop Damon mid-sentence, holding up a finger to look down at the screen, where the text read, "Alert, unusual activity detected on your credit profile, new account opened, Obsidian Infinite. Recent transaction, $5,200 at Gucci Phipps Plaza. Recent transaction, $3,800 at Tag Heuer. Recent transaction, $800 at the Capitol Grill. Please reply yes, if this was you, or no, to report fraud." I stared at the numbers, which were staggering because in less than 6 hours, they had spent nearly $15,000. And looking at the location Phipps Plaza, I knew they had gone straight for the flashiest, most obvious targets. Damon watched me, his eyebrows raised, asking if everything was all right, and I picked up the phone while a slow, cold smile spread across my face. The smile of a trap snapping shut, because I had left that drawer in my old desk jammed for a reason, leaving that expired social security card, and those old account numbers there, like a piece of cheese in a mousetrap. Knowing Brittany and her greed, knowing that if pushed into a corner, she would not look for a job, she would look for a shortcut. Everything is perfect, Damon, I said, my voice calm and deadly, because I just got the notification I have been waiting for. They took the bait. I said they just committed federal identity theft, credit card fraud, and conspiracy across state lines since the bank is headquartered in Delaware, and they did it all on camera in high definition at the most surveilled mall in the city. I tapped the screen replying no to the fraud alert, which immediately caused the bank's automated system to lock the account and trigger a police report protocol. I looked up at Damon, my eyes shining with victory, and said, "They are eating a very expensive steak dinner right now, and I hope they enjoy it because it is going to be their last meal as free citizens." Damon smiled a sharp, predatory grin that matched my own, asking if we should call the detective now or let them finish dessert, and I leaned back in my chair saying, "Let them finish. I want them full and happy when the bill comes due, because this time the bill isn't money, it is 5 to 10 years in a federal penitentiary." Damon reached for the phone to call the fraud department, his finger hovering over the dial pad, but I reached out and gently covered his hand, stopping him. "Not yet, Damon," I said, my voice low and smooth. "Let it run." Damon looked at me, his brow furrowed in confusion. "Jasmine, they have already racked up $15,000 in charges. If we stop this now, we can mitigate the damage. The bank will reverse the charges and we can file the police report immediately." I shook my head, leaning back into the leather chair and crossing my legs. "You are thinking like a defense attorney, Damon, trying to minimize loss. I need you to think like a prosecutor. I need you to think like the Grim Reaper. $15,000 is a lot of money, yes, but it is mostly credit card fraud. It is messy. It can be argued down. They could claim I gave them permission, verbal authorization. They could plead ignorance. I do not want them to have a plea deal. I want them to have a sentence." I tapped the table for emphasis. "I want federal charges, Damon. I want wire fraud. I want aggravated identity theft. I want conspiracy. To make those charges stick, to make sure the FBI gets involved, and not just the local precinct, we need the numbers to be undeniable. We need a pattern of behavior so egregious that no jury in the world would show them mercy. Let them spend. Let them think the well is bottomless. When they cross the $25,000 mark, it pushes the sentencing guidelines into a different tier. I want them to feel rich right up until the moment the handcuffs click." Damon slowly pulled his hand back, a look of professional admiration mixed with a hint of fear crossing his face. "You are terrifying, Jasmine," he said quietly. "I am efficient," I corrected. "Now I need a private investigator. I do not just want digital records, Damon. I want glossies. I want high-definition video. I want a portfolio of their greed. I want to see the joy on their faces while they spend my money, so that when they are crying in court, I can show the judge exactly who they really are." Within an hour, we had hired a man named Silas. He was a former detective with a talent for blending into the background and a camera lens that could read a text message from across the street. He was expensive, but considering he was documenting the destruction of my enemies, he was worth every penny. Over the next 24 hours, my phone became a ticker tape of their excess. Silas sent updates in real time. I sat in my office drinking espresso and watching the show. Update at 10 a.m. Subjects Marcus and Brittany Davis have entered the luxury wing of Lenox Square Mall. They are purchasing luggage. Louis Vuitton. 3 pieces. I checked my bank alerts. $4,000. Approved. Update at noon. Subject Beatrice Davis has joined them. They are at the Apple Store. They are buying iPads and a MacBook Pro. Beatrice is asking if they have gold cases. $3,000. Approved. They were moving with a frenzy now, a manic energy driven by the fear that the magic trick would end at any moment. But when the card did not decline, when the police did not show up, their confidence grew. They started to believe their own lies. They started to believe that they deserved this. They thought I was too busy working my little secretary job to notice the alerts, or perhaps they thought I was too weak to stop them. They mistook my silence for ignorance. They did not know that silence is the sound a predator makes before it strikes. Silas sent me a photo. It was grainy but clear enough. It showed Marcus and Brittany walking down the street carrying shopping bags like trophies. Marcus had a cigar in his mouth. Brittany was wearing huge sunglasses and laughing, her head thrown back. They looked like they owned the city. They looked like they had won the lottery. I zoomed in on the image. I looked at Marcus's wrist, where the new watch sat heavy and gleaming. I looked at the bag on Brittany's arm. They were wearing the evidence. They were wrapping themselves in chains and calling it fashion. By late afternoon, they had grown bold. They were no longer just buying things they could resell or return. They were buying experiences. They were burning the money just to watch it burn. They went to a day spa and booked the couples package. $500. They hired a limousine service to drive them 3 blocks to dinner. $200. My mother Beatrice was the most tragic figure in the play. Silas reported that she was directing the spending, urging them to buy things that would look good at church, things that would prove to her social circle that the Davis family was still on top. She bought a designer hat. She bought a new suit for Sunday service. She was trying to buy back her dignity with stolen credit. Let them eat cake, I whispered to the empty office. As evening fell, the spending slowed down, but only slightly. They were tired. Shopping is hard work when you have no soul. They decided to end their spree with a crowning achievement, a meal that would cement their status as the new royalty of Atlanta. They chose Le Bilboquet, a French bistro known for its exclusivity and its price tag. It was the kind of place where the menu did not have prices, and the waiters spoke to you with a sneer unless you were wearing the right shoes. Brittany and Marcus strode in wearing their new clothes, their new watches, their new arrogance. They demanded the best table. They ordered the tower of seafood, the Wagyu beef, the champagne that cost more than my first car. I watched the transaction alerts roll in. 300 for appetizers, 500 for wine. They were racking up a bill that could feed a family for 6 months, and they were doing it with a smile. Damon walked into my office, his face pale. "They are at 22,000, Jasmine," he said. "Are you sure you want to keep going? This is getting risky. If they max out the card, the bank might freeze it automatically before we can move." "Just a little more," I said, my eyes glued to the screen. "I am waiting for the cherry on top. I need one specific piece of evidence, Damon. I need something that proves intent beyond a shadow of a doubt. Swiping a card is one thing. It can be explained away as authorized use. But signing a name, forging a signature, that is an act of deliberate, conscious fraud. It is the final nail in the coffin." I texted Silas. "Get closer. I need to see the bill." Silas did not disappoint. He had managed to get a table across from them, nursing a coffee and looking like a bored businessman. He had a clear line of sight. The meal ended. The waiter brought the leather folder. I could imagine the tension at the table, the split second of fear before the card was approved. Marcus pulled out the black metal card. He dropped it onto the tray. The waiter took it away. A minute later, the waiter returned. He placed the folder back on the table along with a black pen. This was the moment. This was the trap. Usually they just tapped the card. Usually they just scribbled a line on a digital screen. But at a place like Le Bilboquet, they required a signature. A physical wet ink signature on a paper receipt. I held my breath. Silas's camera shutter clicked silently across the restaurant. The photo hit my phone 10 seconds later. It was a masterpiece. The angle was perfect. It showed Brittany leaning over the table. Her face was illuminated by the candlelight glowing with the wine and the thrill of the theft. She was holding the pen. Her hand was poised over the receipt. And there, in high definition, clear as day, she was writing. She was not writing Brittany Davis. She was not writing Marcus Davis. She was writing Jasmine Davis. She was forging my signature, curving the J just the way I did, trying to mimic the loop of the D. She was stealing my name. I stared at the photo. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. It was exactly what I needed. Gotcha, I whispered. I looked at the transaction alert that popped up a moment later. $2,400. That pushed the total to $24,800. It was close enough. I looked at Damon. It is done, I said. They just signed their own arrest warrants. Damon looked at the photo. He let out a low whistle. That is a federal felony, he said. Forgery in the first degree. Identity theft. Fraud. Call the detective. I said, standing up and smoothing my skirt. Tell him we have the location. Tell him we have the evidence. And tell him to bring extra handcuffs. I have a feeling Brittany is going to resist. I walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere down there, my family was laughing. They were clinking glasses. They were celebrating their victory. They had no idea that the check they just signed was going to bounce them straight into a prison cell. The honeymoon was over. It was time for the divorce. November bled into the calendar, bringing with it the crisp bite of autumn and the impending dread of the holiday season. In my penthouse, high above the city, the air was calm, and the silence was a luxury I had purchased with years of hard work. But down on Magnolia Street, the atmosphere was thick with a new kind of desperation. The identity theft had bought them a temporary reprieve, a few weeks of champagne and designer handbags, but it had not solved the rot at the core of their existence. Marcus had not used the stolen money to pay off his debts. He had used it to pretend he was a king, and now the real kings, the ones who broke kneecaps when they were not paid, were calling. Marcus had a gambling problem that went far deeper than crypto scams and failed business ventures. He owed money to people who did not care about credit scores or declined transactions. They wanted cash, and they wanted it now. The $50,000 limit on the fraudulent card was nearly maxed out on luxury goods that had zero resale value when you needed fast liquidity. The walls were closing in on my brother, and as always, he ran to his mother to fix it. Beatrice was terrified. She knew that if Marcus did not pay these men, they would come to the house. She needed a large sum of money, legal money that could be transferred without questions. Her eyes turned to the only asset she thought she still controlled: the house itself. She wanted to take out a second mortgage, a home equity line of credit, that would give them the cash to pay off the bookies and keep Marcus safe. But there was a problem. The house was technically in a trust. She knew this vaguely, but she did not understand the mechanics. She thought she just needed the signature of the trustee to release the equity. She thought she just needed me. The text message arrived on a Tuesday afternoon while I was reviewing the forensic analysis of a failing tech startup. My phone buzzed and I saw Beatrice's name. I had unblocked her only recently at the advice of the FBI agents who were building the case file on the credit card fraud. They wanted me to keep the lines of communication open to gather more evidence of their intent. The message read, "Jasmine, honey, it is almost Thanksgiving. The family feels incomplete without you. We have all said things we did not mean in the heat of the moment. Please come home for dinner on Thursday. Let us start over. I am making your favorite pecan pie. Love, Mama." I stared at the screen. It was a masterpiece of manipulation. It hit every note: the guilt, the nostalgia, the promise of food, the invocation of family. If I were the girl I was 5 years ago, I might have cried. I might have packed a bag and run home, hoping that this time it was real. But I was not that girl anymore. I was a woman who knew that pecan pie was just sugar and nuts, and that love did not come with a price tag attached to a mortgage deed. I forwarded the text to Damon. He called me immediately. "They want something, Jasmine," he said, his voice crackling with static over the line. "They have maxed out the credit card. They are desperate. If they are inviting you back, It is because they need a signature or a check. I know, I said, staring at the cityscape. They want the house, Damon. They want to leverage the equity. Marcus is in trouble. Do not sign anything, Damon warned. I am not going there to sign, I said, my voice dropping an octave. I am going there to deliver. The federal indictment is almost ready. The fraud investigation is watertight, but I need one last thing. I need them to admit that they know the house is not theirs. I need them to admit they are trying to defraud the trust. If I can get that on tape, it seals the case for the asset seizure. So you are going? Damon asked. I am going, I said. And I am bringing dessert. I prepared for the dinner like I was preparing for a raid. I dressed carefully. I did not wear my usual power suit. I wore a soft cardigan and slacks, an outfit that whispered submission, an outfit that said I was tired and ready to fold. I pulled my hair back into a low bun. I wanted to look like the daughter they remembered, the one who just wanted to please them. Underneath the cardigan, I taped a high-fidelity recording device to the inside of my blouse. It was slim, undetectable, and capable of picking up a whisper from across the room. In my bag, I placed a thick manila folder. It contained the deed to the house, the trust documents, and the foreclosure notice that had been stayed pending the investigation. It was not a checkbook. It was a death warrant for their lifestyle. I drove the Honda Civic to the house. I had kept it in storage for moments like this. Pulling up to the curb on Magnolia Street felt like traveling back in time. The grass was overgrown because the landscaping service was still canceled. The paint was peeling. The house looked like a tired old beast waiting to die, but inside the lights were blazing. They had evidently used the last of the credit line to pay the utility deposit and get the power turned back on. They needed the stage lit for their performance. I walked up the driveway. My heart was beating a slow, steady rhythm against the plastic casing of the recorder. I was not afraid. I was focused. I reached the front door and hesitated for a fraction of a second, remembering the last time I had stood here dropping my key on the table. That felt like a lifetime ago. I knocked. The door swung open instantly, as if they had been standing right behind it waiting. Beatrice stood there wearing a new dress I recognized from the credit card statements. She had a smile plastered on her face that didn't reach her eyes. Jasmine, she cried, throwing her arms open. You came. I stepped into the embrace and my body went rigid. She smelled of expensive perfume bought with my money. She smelled of betrayal. Hi, Mama, I said, keeping my voice soft and meek. Come in, come in. She ushered me into the hallway. Everyone is so excited to see you. I walked into the living room. It was staged perfectly. The table was set with the good china that the antique dealer had rejected. There were candles burning. A turkey sat in the center of the table, golden and glistening. It looked like a Norman Rockwell painting, if Norman Rockwell painted grifters. Marcus was sitting on the couch nursing a beer. He looked thinner, his eyes darting around the room nervously. When he saw me, he stood up a little too quickly. Hey, Jazz, he said, forcing a grin that looked more like a grimace. Good to see you, sis. Brittany was standing by the fireplace holding a glass of wine. She was wearing the diamond studs Marcus had bought her with my identity. They caught the light sparkling with stolen brilliance. She looked me up and down, her eyes lingering on my simple clothes, my lack of jewelry. She took a sip of wine and smirked. I gripped the strap of my bag tighter, feeling the weight of the file inside. I walked further into the room, letting the door click shut behind me. The trap was set. Beatrice bustled into the kitchen. Sit down, Jasmine, sit down. I will get you a plate. We have so much to catch up on. I sat at my old spot, the chair that always wobbled slightly. Marcus sat opposite me. Brittany stayed standing, hovering like a vulture. So, Jasmine, Marcus said, leaning forward, his knee bouncing nervously under the table. How is work? Still at the firm? Still there? I lied smoothly. Just keeping my head down. It has been a hard few weeks. I bet Brittany said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. It must be hard being alone, especially during the holidays. We were so worried about you. Beatrice came back with a plate piled high with food. She set it down in front of me and placed a hand on my shoulder. "We are just glad you are home," she said. "Family belongs together. We realized that we were too harsh on you, Jasmine. We want to make things right." I looked down at the turkey. I knew exactly where this was going. They were buttering me up, softening the target before they went in for the kill. "That means a lot, Mama," I said, allowing a tremor to enter my voice. "I have missed you guys." Beatrice squeezed my shoulder. "We missed you too, baby. And you know we have been thinking about the future, about security. Marcus has a new business opportunity, a really big one. But we need to secure some capital. Here it comes, I thought." The pivot. We were looking at the house paperwork, Marcus chimed in, licking his lips. "And we realized that there is a lot of equity just sitting here doing nothing. If we could just access a little bit of it, we could set everyone up for life. You included, Jazz. We could pay you back for everything." Beatrice nodded vigorously. "Exactly. But the bank said, since your name is on the trust documents, we just need you to sign a little paperwork. Just a formality, really, to show you agree to help the family." I looked at them wide-eyed, playing the part. "You want me to sign for a loan?" "Just a co-signature," Brittany said, stepping closer, her voice sharp. "It is not a big deal, Jasmine. It just lets us use the house as collateral. Unless you want your mother to struggle, unless you want us to lose everything." I touched my chest, making sure the recorder was still secure. "So you know the house is in the trust?" I asked clearly. "You know it is not in Mom's name?" "Yes, yes, we know," Beatrice said impatiently. "That is why we need you. You just sign the paper, we get the money, and Marcus handles the rest. You will not have to pay a dime." I looked at Marcus. He was sweating. He looked like a man who owed money to people who owned pliers. "And the money is for business?" I asked. "Strictly business," Marcus lied. I reached into my bag. The room went silent. They watched my hand, expecting a pen. They expecting me to pull out a checkbook or a pen to sign the document they had undoubtedly prepared. Brittany leaned down to Marcus, her voice a low whisper that she thought I could not hear, but the microphone caught it perfectly, crystal clear and damning. "Look at her," Brittany whispered, a sneer curling her lip. "She is pathetic. She came crawling back just like we knew she would. She is here to sign the debt note for us. Stupid girl. She has no idea she is signing her own death warrant." I froze, my hand wrapped around the manila folder. Stupid girl. Death warrant. I looked up. I looked at Brittany. I looked at Marcus. I looked at Beatrice. I pulled the folder out. I placed it on the table right next to the turkey. I did not open it yet. I just let my hand rest on the cover, feeling the texture of the paper. "You are right, Brittany," I said, my voice dropping the facade of the meek daughter. "I am here to sign something, but it isn't a loan." I flipped the folder open. The foreclosure notice lay on top, stark and terrifying. Beneath it was the copy of the federal investigation subpoena for the credit card fraud. I looked Brittany dead in the eye. "I am here to sign your eviction notice. And unlike the loan, this one is non-negotiable." Here is the continuation of the script, following the previous style and context. The red wine dripped off the edge of the table, staining the carpet a deep, violent crimson, but no one moved to clean it up. All eyes were glued to the manila folder I had thrown onto the table. The silence in the room had shifted from expectant to terrified. The air crackled with a static charge, the kind that comes right before lightning strikes. Beatrice stared at the folder as if it were a venomous snake. Her chest heaved. "What is this?" she whispered, her voice trembling, not with sorrow but with the dawning realization that she had lost control. "Open it," I said, my voice cutting through the room like a scalpel. "It is the only inheritance you are ever going to get from me." Marcus reached out his hand, shaking so badly he knocked a spoon onto the floor. He flipped open the cover. The first thing he saw was the foreclosure notice stamped with the undeniable authority of the bank. His face went gray. He flipped the page. There were the photos Silas had taken. Brittany signing the receipt at Le Bill Bouquet, Marcus trying on the watch, Beatrice holding the shopping bags, high-definition proof of their gluttony. And then the indictment, the federal charges, wire fraud, identity theft, conspiracy. Marcus made a sound like a wounded animal. He dropped the folder as if it burned him. He looked at Brittany, his eyes wide and wet. "They know," he choked out. "They know everything." Brittany snatched the folder. She scanned the pages, her face twisting into a mask of pure ugly rage. She looked up at me, and for the first time the smugness was gone, replaced by the feral look of a cornered rat. "You set us up!" she screeched. "You left that card there. You wanted us to use it." "I left a trap for a thief," I replied calmly. "You are the one who walked into it. You are the one who forged my signature. You are the one who stole my identity. Did you really think I wouldn't notice $50,000 missing? Did you think I was that stupid?" Beatrice grabbed the table for support. "Police!" she gasped. "You called the police on your own mother." "I called the FBI, mother," I corrected. "This isn't a family dispute anymore. This is a federal crime. You crossed state lines. You defrauded a national bank. You conspired to steal assets from a protected trust. That makes it federal." Pastor Jenkins stood up, his napkin fluttering to the floor. "Sister Beatrice," he said, his voice tight, I think I should go. This seems like a legal matter." "Sit down, Pastor," I said, not looking at him. "You wanted to witness a family moment. This is it. This is the moment where the truth comes out." I turned back to my mother. "You wanted me to pay your bills. You wanted me to be responsible. Well, I am holding you responsible now. You sold my father's memory for a few weeks of luxury. You tried to mortgage the only thing he left behind to pay for your son's gambling addiction." "It wasn't gambling," Beatrice shrieked. "It was business." "It was a bookie named Sal," I said. "And he is already talking to the authorities because I gave them his number too." Marcus put his head in his hands and began to sob. It wasn't a cry of remorse. It was the cry of a man who knew his toys were being taken away. "You can't do this," Brittany hissed. "We have rights. We are family." "You have the right to remain silent," I said. "And I suggest you use it." I looked at my watch. "Because the agents I spoke to said they would be here by dessert. And look at that." I pointed to the grandfather clock in the corner. "It is time for pie." As if on cue, the heavy thud of car doors slamming echoed from the street outside. Blue and red lights began to flash through the sheer curtains, painting the dining room in a chaotic strobe light disco of consequences. Beatrice ran to the window. She pulled back the curtain and let out a wail that made the hair on my arms stand up. "They are here. Oh God, they are here." I picked up my purse. I adjusted my cardigan. I looked at the red plastic plate sitting in front of me, empty and cheap. "I think I will skip the pecan pie, Mother," I said. "I have lost my appetite." I walked to the front door. Behind me, the chaos was absolute. Brittany was trying to run out the back door. Marcus was frozen in his chair. Beatrice was on her knees praying to a god she had ignored until she needed a bailout. I opened the door to the cool night air. 2 SUVs were pulled up to the curb. Agents in windbreakers were walking up the path, their faces grim and professional. "Ms. Davis?" the lead agent asked. "That is me," I said. "They are inside. The evidence is on the table. And be careful with the blonde one. She bites." I walked past them down the driveway, past the peeling paint and the overgrown grass. I got into my Honda Civic. I didn't look back. I didn't need to see them in handcuffs to know it was over. I had broken the cycle. I had burned the bridge. And as I drove away, leaving the flashing lights in my rearview mirror, I realized that for the first time in my life, I wasn't just surviving. I was free. The mortgage document felt light in my hand, almost weightless for something that carried so much destruction. Beatrice was watching me with hungry eyes, her hands clasped together in a mockery of prayer. She was waiting for the scratch of the pen that would save her reputation and doom my financial future. Beside her, Marcus was practically vibrating with anticipation, his eyes locked on the paper, as if it were a winning lottery ticket. Brittany swirled her wine, her lips curled in a smirk that said she thought she had won, that she had outsmarted the quiet sister who paid the bills. I looked at the paper one last time, reading the terms that would enslave a person for 30 years. Then I opened my hand. I did not throw it, I did not tear it. I simply let gravity do the work. The document fluttered down, drifting through the stagnant air of the dining room, before landing face down on the dirty carpet right next to Beatrice's expensive shoes. The sound of the paper hitting the floor was softer than a whisper, but in that room it sounded like a gunshot. Beatrice's smile faltered. Her eyes darted from the paper to my face, confusion warring with the anger that was always simmering just beneath her skin. "Pick that up, Jasmine," she hissed, her voice low and dangerous. "Pick it up and sign it. Stop playing games. We have guests." I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms over my chest. "I am not playing games, Mother," I said, my voice steady and cool, filling the corners of the room. "And I am not signing that paper. Not because I am stubborn, not because I am mean, but because I cannot legally sign a mortgage for a property that does not belong to you." Beatrice laughed, a sharp bark of a sound that lacked any humor. "Do not be ridiculous," she said, looking around the table for support. "This is my house. Your father built this house. I have lived here for 40 years. Of course it is my house." I reached for the first folder, the blue one, that had been sitting under the foreclosure notice. I opened it slowly, deliberately, letting them see the official seals and the government stamps. "You lived here, Mother," I corrected her, "but you stopped paying for the privilege a long time ago. Do you remember 3 years ago when you started throwing away those envelopes with the red stripes? The ones from the county tax commissioner. You told Marcus they were just scams. You told Daddy not to worry about them." Beatrice went pale, the rouge on her cheeks standing out like bruises. "I paid those," she stammered. "I gave Marcus the money to go down to the courthouse." I looked at Marcus. He shrank into his chair, refusing to meet anyone's gaze. We both knew where that money had gone. It had gone to a crypto wallet that no longer existed. "You did not pay them," I said. "And the county does not care about your intentions, Beatrice. They care about their money. After 2 years of non-payment, they put the house up for auction on the courthouse steps. It was a Tuesday morning. It was raining. I was there. The room was so quiet you could hear the hum of the refrigerator that I had paid to repair. The wealthy cousins were exchanging glances, their discomfort palpable. They had come for a family reunion and found themselves at an autopsy. I bought the tax lien," I continued, my voice devoid of emotion. "I bought the debt you owed to the county. And then I waited. I waited the full 12-month redemption period required by Georgia law. I waited for you to notice. I waited for you to try and save your home. But you were too busy buying hats and pretending to be rich to notice that the roof over your head was being sold out from under you." Brittany set her wineglass down a little too hard. "What does that mean?" she asked, her voice shrill. "What does a tax lien mean?" "It means, Brittany, that when the redemption period expired without payment, I foreclosed on the right of redemption," I said, turning my gaze to her. "I finalized the process 6 months ago. I did it quietly. I did it through a holding company so you would not know it was me. I wanted to see how long you would keep pretending." I pulled a document from the folder and slid it across the table. It slid over the tablecloth, stopping right in front of the pastor. He looked down at it. It was a deed under power. "The owner of this house is not Beatrice Davis," I said clearly. "The owner is JD Holdings, LLC. JD stands for Jasmine Davis." I leaned forward, placing my elbows on the table. "You cannot mortgage this house, Mother, because you do not have the title. You do not have the equity. You do not even have a lease. For the last 6 months, you have been squatting in my property. You are not the matriarch of this estate. You are a guest who has overstayed her welcome." The pastor's hand shook. His silver fork slipped from his fingers and clattered against his china plate, a jarring, ringing sound that echoed the shock on everyone's faces. He looked at the deed, then at Beatrice, then at me. He looked like a man who realized he had been praying for the wrong side. Beatrice stood up so fast, her chair tipped over backward, crashing onto the floor. Her face was a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. She slammed her hands onto the table, rattling the silverware. "You are a liar," she screamed, her voice shredding the polite atmosphere of the dinner. "You are a liar, Jasmine. You are trying to humiliate me in front of my family. You think you can just walk in here with your fake papers and your fancy suit and steal my house. I birthed you. I raised you. This is my house. It will always be my house." She grabbed the deed from in front of the pastor and tried to rip it. But the paper was thick, heavy cardstock and her hands were shaking too badly. She crumpled it instead, throwing it at me. It bounced off my chest and landed in my lap. "It is not a lie, Mother," I said, smoothing the paper out calmly. "And tearing up a copy does not change the public record. You can go down to the courthouse tomorrow if you want. You can look it up in the deed book. Volume 412, page 60. It is all there. Beatrice Davis Grantor, J.D. Holdings, LLC grantee. Consideration paid $54,000 in back taxes and fees." Brittany looked at Marcus. Marcus looked at the floor. They were doing the math. They were realizing that the equity they had planned to steal the money they had promised to the loan sharks simply did not exist. They had been trying to rob an empty vault. "You tricked us," Brittany whispered, her face draining of color. "You let us think we had a way out. You let us invite everyone here. You let us spend the last of the credit card limit on this dinner thinking we would get a payout." "I did not trick you," I said. "I gave you enough rope. I watched you tie the knot. I watched you step up onto the chair. And now I am just kicking it away." Beatrice was hyperventilating now, clutching her chest, gasping for air. This was usually the part where I would rush to her side, where I would get her water, where I would promise to fix everything just to make her stop hurting. But I sat still. I watched her performance with the detached interest of a critic watching a bad play. "It is not true," she wailed, looking at her wealthy sister, hoping for a savior. "Tell her she is lying, Lucille. Tell her she cannot do this to her mother." Aunt Lucille looked at the deed lying on the table. She looked at the foreclosure notice. She was a woman who understood money, who understood property. She knew what a deed looked like. She slowly shook her head. "It looks legal." Beatrice Lucille said, her voice quiet and apologetic. "It is stamped and notarized. If she bought the tax lien and you didn't pay it back, she owns the house. That is how the law works." Beatrice let out a sound that was half scream, half sob. She looked at me with eyes full of hatred. "You stole it," she hissed. "You stole my life." "I saved it." I snapped back, my voice finally rising, matching her intensity. "I saved this house from strangers. If I hadn't bought that lien, an investor would have kicked you out 3 years ago. I let you stay. I paid the insurance. I paid the repairs. I let you play pretend because I hoped that maybe, just maybe, you would treat me with a shred of decency. But you didn't. You treated me like a bank account. You treated me like a doormat. And tonight you tried to trick me into signing a loan to pay for your son's mistakes." I stood up, gathering my files. "The time for mercy is over, Mother. You are not the victim here. You are the architect of your own disaster." I looked at the pastor, who was wiping sweat from his forehead with a napkin. "I am sorry to ruin your dinner, Pastor," I said. "But I think you should say a prayer for this family. They are going to need it, because they are about to be homeless." I turned to walk away, but Brittany lunged across the table, her fingernails aiming for my face, a desperate feral attempt to hurt the person who had exposed her. Brittany lunged across the table, her fingers curled into claws, desperate to tear the smirk off my face, but she never made it. Marcus, seemingly waking up from his stupor, grabbed her by the waist and hauled her back. She thrashed against him, screaming obscenities that would have made a sailor blush, her mask of southern gentility completely dissolved into the raw panic of a trapped animal. I did not flinch. I did not step back. I stood my ground, smoothing the front of my cardigan as if I had just brushed off a speck of dust. "Sit down, Brittany," I said, my voice cutting through her screams like a blade. "You are going to want to see this." I walked over to the 60-inch television, the one I had bought them years ago, the one Marcus had been staring at when the lights went out. I pulled a small HDMI cable from my bag and plugged it into my phone. The screen flickered to life, casting a harsh blue glow over the dining room. Beatrice looked up, her eyes red and swollen, her hands trembling as she clutched a napkin. "What are you doing?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of Brittany's heavy breathing. I did not answer. I simply swiped my screen. The first image appeared on the giant TV. It was crisp, high definition, taken by Silas just days ago. It showed Marcus and Brittany walking out of Phipps Plaza. They looked triumphant. They were holding shopping bags like trophies, their heads thrown back in laughter. The logo on the bags was unmistakable. Louis Vuitton. I swiped again. There was Beatrice trying on a silk scarf at the Apple store, looking at her reflection with vanity that bordered on sin. I swiped again. The receipt from the day spa. $500 for a couple's massage while they claimed they could not afford electricity. "You told me you were broke," I said, looking at Marcus, who was staring at the screen with his mouth open. "You told me you needed money for business. You told me you were desperate. But this does not look like desperation to me, Marcus. This looks like a shopping spree. This looks like theft." Marcus sank into the sofa, his face pale. "That is not what it looks like," he stammered, but the lie died on his lips. The evidence was glowing in front of him, 10 feet tall. I swiped to the next image. This one was a close-up of a receipt from Tag Heuer. $3,800. I looked at Marcus's wrist. He instinctively covered the watch with his other hand, but it was too late. Everyone had seen it. The wealthy cousins were whispering now, pointing at the screen and then at Marcus. The pastor looked like he was about to be sick. I swiped to the final image. The room went deadly silent. It was the photo of Brittany at the French bistro Le Bilboquet. The candle was lighting her face, making her look almost angelic if not for the pen in her hand. And there, magnified on the 60-inch screen, was the receipt. The signature was clear. It was not Brittany Davis. It was Jasmine Davis. Brittany stopped struggling. She stared at the screen, her eyes wide with horror. "That is not me," she tried to say, but her voice cracked. The diamond earrings she was wearing caught the light, the same diamonds listed on the invoice I pulled from the second folder. I walked over to her. I looked down at the handbag sitting on the floor next to her feet. It was the Gucci bag. The leather was supple and new. I leaned in close, invading her personal space until I could smell the fear radiating off her. "I hope you like that bag, Brittany," I said softly. "I really do. Because you should keep it very safe. It is not an accessory anymore. It is Exhibit A in a federal trial." Beatrice let out a low moan. She looked at the screen, then at me. "You tracked us," she whispered. "You watched us." I nodded. "I watched you steal from me, Mother. I watched you take my identity, my good name, the credit I built with 15 years of hard work, and treat it like your personal piggy bank. You spent $25,000 in 48 hours. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? Did you really think I wouldn't fight back?" I opened the second folder. I pulled out the credit card statements, the fraud affidavits, the police reports. I fanned them out on the table next to the deed. "This is not just a family dispute," I said, my voice rising, filling the room. "This is grand larceny. This is wire fraud. This is aggravated identity theft. And because the bank is headquartered in Delaware, you crossed state lines. That makes it federal." Marcus began to cry. It was a pathetic sound, a weeping that came from a man who had never had to face a consequence in his life. "Ma, do something," he sobbed. "Ma, she is going to send us to jail." Beatrice looked at me. Her eyes were pleading. "Jasmine, please, we can fix this. We will pay you back. We will sell the things. Just tell them it was a mistake. Tell them you gave us permission." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had raised me, who had taught me to be strong, and then punished me for it. I felt nothing. The well of sympathy was dry. I pulled my arm away from her grasp. "It is too late for that," I said. "The fraud alert was filed days ago. The investigation is closed. The indictment is sealed. I cannot stop this train, Mother. I am the one who built the tracks." And then a sound cut through the heavy air of the room. At first it was faint, a distant wail rising and falling in the night. But it grew louder quickly. It was not the sound of a single police car. It was a chorus. It was the sound of consequences arriving at 60 miles per hour. Marcus ran to the window. He peered through the blinds. His face went white. "It is the cops," he yelled, his voice cracking. "It is the cops, and there are SUVs, black SUVs." The wealthy cousins stood up, knocking over their chairs. They scrambled toward the back door, desperate to distance themselves from the disaster. The pastor was already in the hallway, muttering prayers as he fumbled with the lock. Beatrice grabbed my shoulders, shaking me. "Stop them, Jasmine! Stop them right now! I am your mother!" "You stopped being my mother the moment you stole my name," I said, pushing her hands away. The siren stopped abruptly right outside the house, replaced by the heavy slam of car doors and the sound of boots on the pavement. The front door, which I had left unlocked, flew open. Damon walked in first. He looked calm, professional, a shark in a suit. He looked at the chaos in the room, the spilled wine, the crying family, the evidence on the TV screen. He looked at me and nodded. Behind him, filling the hallway, were men in jackets emblazoned with 3 letters: FBI. They did not look like they were here for dinner. They looked like they were here to take out the trash. One of the agents stepped forward, his hand resting on his holster. "Beatrice Davis. Marcus Davis. Brittany Davis," he said, his voice booming. "You are under arrest." Brittany screamed, a high, piercing sound that echoed off the walls. Marcus tried to run toward the kitchen, but an agent tackled him to the ground before he made it 3 steps. Beatrice simply collapsed into her chair, weeping into her hands. I picked up my purse. I looked at Damon. "It is all yours," I said. I walked past the agents, past my brother being handcuffed on the floor, past my mother sobbing my name. I walked out into the cool night air. The street was lit up with blue and red lights. Neighbors were standing on their porches watching the spectacle. I got into my car. I did not look back. I put the car in drive and pulled away, leaving the house on Magnolia Street behind me forever. The show was over. The curtain had fallen, and I had the only standing ovation that mattered: my freedom. The room seemed to shrink the moment the federal agent stepped fully into the light. The grandeur of the dining room, with its crystal glasses and silver candlesticks, instantly evaporated, leaving behind only a sordid crime scene. The lead agent, a man with a face carved from granite, walked straight to the head of the table. He did not look at the turkey or the spilled wine. He looked directly at Marcus and Brittany. He pulled a folded paper from his jacket pocket, and the rustle of that paper was the only sound in the world. "Marcus, Davis, and Brittany." "Davis," he announced, his voice a heavy baritone that vibrated in the floorboards. "You are under arrest for federal identity theft, aggravated credit card fraud, and conspiracy to commit wire fraud. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." The words hung in the air, heavy and absolute. For a second, nobody moved. It was as if their brains could not process the shift from a family dinner to a federal raid. Then the reality crashed down. Brittany let out a sound that was less a scream and more a animalistic shriek of denial. She scrambled backward, knocking her chair over, trying to put distance between herself and the handcuffs gleaming on the agent's belt. "It was him," she screamed, pointing a manicured finger at Marcus. "It was his idea. He made me do it. He said she owed us the money. He said she wouldn't notice. I didn't want to do it." Marcus stared at her, his eyes wide with betrayal. The woman who had urged him on, who had swiped the card with glee, who had called him a king, was now throwing him to the wolves before the cuffs even touched his skin. He looked from her to the agents, and then his knees gave out. He collapsed onto the carpet, not in a faint, but in a surrender of all dignity. He curled into a ball, sobbing into his hands. "Ma," he wailed, his voice high and thin like a child's. "Ma, don't let them take me. Tell them it's a mistake. Tell them we have the money. It wasn't my fault." The agents moved with practiced efficiency. They did not care about the finger-pointing or the tears. Two of them hauled Marcus up from the floor. He was dead weight, his legs useless. They spun him around, and I heard the distinct metallic click of the handcuffs ratcheting tight. It was a sound of finality, a sound that locked the door on his delusions of grandeur. Brittany fought. When the female agent reached for her, she tried to slap her hand away. That was a mistake. Within seconds, she was spun around and pressed face first against the wall next to the china cabinet. Her cheek was smashed against the floral wallpaper. Her arms were wrenched behind her back. "Get off me!" she yelled, thrashing against the restraint. "Do you know who I am? I am a victim here. She stole my life." "You are a suspect under federal indictment, ma'am," the agent said calmly, snapping the cuffs on her wrists. "And you are making it worse." Beatrice stood in the center of the chaos, watching her world disintegrate. She looked at Marcus weeping as he was dragged toward the door. She looked at Brittany pinned against the wall. The arrogance that had sustained her for decades, the pride that had made her cruel. It all evaporated, leaving behind a terrified old woman. She realized in that moment that her social standing, her reputation, her very identity as the matriarch was being hauled away in handcuffs. She turned to me. Her eyes were wild, desperate. She threw herself at my feet, dropping to her knees on the wine-stained carpet. She grabbed the hem of my slacks, her fingers digging into the fabric. "Jasmine, please," she begged, her voice cracking into a sob. "They are your family. You cannot let them go to prison. Just tell the officers it was a mistake. Tell them you gave permission. I will do anything. I will sign the paper. I will give you the furniture. Just stop this." I looked down at her, down. This was the woman who had sneered at my clothes. This was the woman who had told me to leave my father's house. This was the woman who had watched me pay her bills for a decade and never said thank you. Now she was on her knees offering me scraps, offering me things I already owned or did not want. I felt a strange sense of detachment. I did not feel hate. I did not feel pity. I just felt clean. I reached down and peeled her fingers off my leg one by one. Her grip was weak. "Get up, Mother," I said, my voice flat and cold. "You are embarrassing yourself. You cannot trade a house you do not own for a crime that has already been committed. This is not a negotiation. This is the consequence you ignored for 30 years. "But they are going to jail," she wailed, clutching at the air where my leg had been. "They broke the law," I said, stepping back. "They stole from me. They stole from the bank. And you watched them do it. You ate the steak, Mother. You wore the scarf. You are not a victim. Not a... You are an accomplice." Damon stepped forward, signaling to the agents. "It is time to go," he said. The agents began the march to the door. They shoved Marcus and Brittany ahead of them. Marcus was still crying, stumbling over his own feet. Brittany was silent now, her face a mask of shock, her expensive makeup smeared across her cheek. She was still clutching the Gucci bag in her cuffed hands until an agent gently but firmly pulled it away. "That stays here," the agent said. "It is evidence." I followed them out of the dining room, down the hallway where the family photos smiled down at the wreckage. We stepped out onto the front porch, and the night exploded with light. The entire street was awake. The flashing blue and red lights of the federal SUVs bounced off the houses, creating a surreal strobe effect. The neighbors had come out. They were standing in their driveways, on their lawns, huddled in small groups. I saw Mrs. Higgins from next door, her hand over her mouth. I saw the man who walked his dog every morning, staring with wide eyes. And there, standing right by her mailbox, was Deaconess Williams, the woman whose opinion Beatrice valued above all else. Deaconess Williams was wearing her nightgown and a robe, her arms crossed over her chest. She watched as Marcus was shoved into the back of a government vehicle, his head bowed in shame. She watched as Brittany was guided into the second car, her head held high in a pathetic attempt at defiance. And then she saw Beatrice. Beatrice stumbled out the front door, wailing, clutching her chest. She looked disheveled, broken, and utterly disgraced. She locked eyes with Deaconess Williams. The deaconess did not wave. She did not offer help. She simply shook her head slowly, a judgment more damning than any verdict, and turned back toward her house. The shame hit Beatrice like a physical blow. She collapsed onto the porch step, covering her face with her hands, trying to hide from the lights, trying to hide from the eyes of the neighborhood she had tried so hard to impress. I walked past her. I walked down the driveway, my heels clicking on the concrete. I stopped by Damon's car. "Are you okay?" Jasmine Damon asked quietly. I looked back at the house. The front door was open, revealing the empty hallway. The lights were still on, illuminating the stage where the tragedy had played out. I looked at the police cars pulling away, their sirens chirping once as they navigated the narrow street. "I am fine," I said. "I am better than fine." I got into my car. I started the engine. I did not look at my mother weeping on the porch. I put the car in drive and merged into the street, driving past the neighbors, past the judgment, past the life I used to live. The rear-view mirror was filled with red and blue lights fading into the distance. The nightmare was over. I was awake. The silence that descended on Magnolia Street after the last police cruiser turned the corner was heavier than the humid Georgia air. It was a physical weight pressing down on the manicured lawns and the dark windows of the neighbors who were still watching from behind their curtains. The blue and red strobe lights were gone, leaving only the harsh yellow glow of the porch light illuminating the wreckage of my family. Beatrice was still slumped on the concrete steps, her expensive dress pulled around her like a wilting flower. Her hands were covering her face, and her shoulders shook with silent tremors. Standing in the doorway looking like a ghost haunting his own life was my father, Otis. He looked small and frail, stripped of the dignity he had tried so hard to maintain in a house that never respected him. I stood at the bottom of the driveway, my hand resting on the cool metal of my car door. I could have left right then. I could have gotten in the car and driven back to my penthouse, back to the white tea scent and the city views. I had won. Marcus and Brittany were in custody. The fraud was exposed. The debt was revealed. But there was one piece of paper left in my bag, one final untied thread that needed to be cut before I could truly be free. I walked back up the driveway. The sound of my heels on the pavement made Beatrice look up. Her face was a ruin of smeared mascara and grief. When she saw me, her expression shifted from sorrow to a white-hot hatred that burned through the tears. "Are you satisfied?" She spat, her voice raspy and broken. "Are you happy now, Jasmine? You sent your brother to prison. You destroyed your family. I hope you are proud of yourself." I stopped at the foot of the steps looking down at her. I did not feel pride. I did not feel joy. I felt the clinical detachment of a surgeon removing a gangrenous limb. It had to be done to save the body, but it was still a messy, ugly business. "I am not happy, Mother," I said quietly. "I am just finished." I reached into my bag and pulled out the last document. It was a single sheet of paper folded in thirds. I extended it toward her. Beatrice stared at it, refusing to take it. "What is this?" she asked. "Another indictment. Another trap." "It is a notice to vacate," I said. Otis made a sound in the doorway, a low moan of despair. Beatrice snatched the paper from my hand and unfolded it. Her eyes scanned the legal text, the bold headers, the dates. "Eviction." She whispered the word, strangling in her throat. "You are evicting us." I nodded. "JD Holdings LLC is the owner of this property." I explained, my voice flat and professional. "As the owner, I have a liability to protect the asset. Tonight, federal crimes were committed on this property. Illegal activities involving fraud and theft. That is a violation of the implied terms of occupancy. I cannot have criminals living in my house." Beatrice scrambled to her feet, clutching the railing for support. "You cannot do this!" she screamed, her voice rising to a hysterical pitch that made the neighbor's dog start barking. "This is my home. I have lived here for 30 years. You cannot kick me out. I am your mother." You are a tenant at will, I corrected her. And you have violated the law. In the state of Georgia, that gives me the right to terminate your residency. You have 30 days. That is more than the law requires given the circumstances, but I am feeling generous. You have until December 20th to vacate the premises. 30 days, Beatrice wailed. Where are we supposed to go? We have no money. You know we have no money. You took the credit card. You took the house. You took everything. I took back what was mine, I said. As for where you go, that is not my concern. Maybe you can stay with Aunt Lucille. Or maybe you can ask the pastor for a room in the rectory since you donated so much of my money to the building fund over the years. Beatrice lunged at me but stopped short at the bottom step, her energy spent. She looked at me with a look of pure revulsion. You are a devil, she hissed. You are a cold, heartless, ungrateful child. I gave you life. I fed you. I clothed you. And this is how you repay me, by throwing me on the street like garbage. I looked at her calmly. You gave me life, Mother, but you spent the last 30 years trying to drain it out of me. You fed me scraps while you gave Marcus the feast. You clothed me in shame while you wrapped yourself in vanity. I do not owe you a roof over your head. I do not owe you a lifestyle you cannot afford. The debt is paid. I looked up at Otis. He was leaning against the doorframe, tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. He did not look angry. He just looked tired. So incredibly tired. I am sorry, Daddy, I said softly. Otis nodded slowly. He understood. He knew that he had made his choice years ago when he decided to stay silent. He knew that silence had a price, and the bill had finally come due. He turned and walked back into the empty hallway, disappearing into the shadows of the house he had lost. Beatrice was still screaming insults at my back, calling me names that no mother should ever call her child. Ungrateful, wicked, failure. But the words bounced off me. They were just noise now. The opinions of a woman who was no longer my landlord, no longer my master, no longer my problem. I turned and walked down the driveway for the last time. Damon was leaning against the hood of his car waiting for me. He had watched the whole exchange, his face impassive. He knew the law. He knew the necessity of the eviction. But even he looked a little weary from the sheer toxicity of the night. I stopped in front of him. I looked back at the house on Magnolia Street. It looked small now. It looked like just a pile of bricks and wood and bad memories. It did not look like a monster anymore. It just looked like a house. Is it done? Damon asked. It is done, I said. They have the notice. The clock is ticking. What do you want to do with the property? He asked. Once they are out, do you want to keep it as a rental? The market in this area is appreciating. It could be a good long-term hold. I shook my head immediately. The thought of owning that house, of having my name attached to that address for 1 second longer than necessary, made my skin crawl. I did not want the equity. I did not want the profit. I wanted an exorcism. Sell it, I said. Damon blinked. You want to list it? I want it gone, Damon, I said, my voice hard. I do not care about the market value. I do not care about the profit margin. List it below market. Sell it to a flipper. Sell it to a developer who wants to bulldoze it and build condos. I do not care. I just want my name off that deed. I do not want to own a single brick of that place. It smells like them. It smells like betrayal. Damon nodded, making a note on his phone. Understood. We will list it the day the 30 days are up. We will scrub the title and liquefy the asset. Good, I said. I opened the door to my Honda. I paused, looking at Damon. Thank you, Damon. For everything. He smiled a small, genuine smile. That is what you pay me for, Jasmine. But for the record, you are the scary one. I just file the paperwork. I got into the car and started the engine. I pulled away from the curb, leaving Damon and the police tape and the weeping woman on the porch behind me. I drove toward the highway, toward the city lights that were waiting for me. I rolled down the window and let the cold night air rush in, blowing away the scent of roast turkey and expensive perfume. I was alone. I had no parents. I had no brother. I had no sister-in-law. I was an orphan by choice. And as I merged onto the interstate and pushed the accelerator down, feeling the car surge forward, I realized that I had never felt more whole. The family tree was dead, but the root was still strong. I was the root. And now, finally, I had room to grow. 3 months later, the gavel hit the mahogany bench with a sound that signaled the end of the Davis family delusions. The courtroom was cold and smelled of floor wax and stale anxiety. Marcus and Brittany stood before the judge in matching orange jumpsuits, their designer clothes having been traded for state-issued polyester that fit poorly and scratched their skin. The judge, a stern woman who had zero patience for financial predators, read the sentence with a monotone finality that made it even more terrifying. 3 years in a federal penitentiary for aggravated identity theft and conspiracy to commit wire fraud, followed by 5 years of supervised probation and full restitution of the stolen funds. Marcus collapsed onto the defense table, burying his face in his hands, his shoulders heaving with the realization that his life as he knew it was over. He looked toward the gallery, searching for his mother, for anyone to save him, but the benches were empty, save for a few bored reporters and his weeping father. Beatrice was not there. She could not afford the bus fare to the federal courthouse downtown. Brittany did not cry. She stood rigid, her face hard and pale. As the bailiffs moved to shackle them, she turned to her lawyer, who pulled a thick envelope from his briefcase. She took it and slapped it down on the table in front of Marcus. "I am filing for divorce," she said, her voice devoid of the fake sweetness she had used to manipulate my family for years. "I am not spending my 30s waiting for a broke felon. You are useless, Marcus. You always were." Marcus looked up at her, his eyes wide with shock. "But we are in this together," he whispered. "No," Brittany sneered as the bailiff grabbed her arm. "You are in this alone. I was just along for the ride, and the ride is over." She turned and let herself be led away, leaving my brother sobbing over his divorce papers in handcuffs, a man who had lost his freedom, his wife, and his dignity in a single gavel strike. While Marcus and Brittany were being processed into the federal system, Beatrice and Otis were fighting a different kind of war in a cramped studio apartment on the south side of town. The apartment was a far cry from the Colonial on Magnolia Street. It was a single room with a kitchenette that smelled permanently of boiled cabbage and damp drywall. The carpet was thin and stained, and the window looked out onto a brick wall in an alleyway where stray cats fought at night. They had been evicted exactly 30 days after I served the notice. Damon had sold the house to a developer within a week for below market value just to be rid of it. The bulldozers were already scheduled to tear it down. Beatrice had managed to salvage only a few boxes of clothes and the fake antique china that no one wanted to buy. The social fallout had been swift and brutal. The news of the arrest had spread through their church community like wildfire. Deaconess Williams had personally called Beatrice not to offer support, but to inform her that she had been removed from the choir and the planning committee. The friends who used to come over for Sunday dinner, the women Beatrice had tried so hard to impress with her hats and her airs, simply stopped answering the phone. When Beatrice and Otis showed up for service 2 weeks ago, the usher had quietly suggested they sit in the back row, away from the respectable families. They had not gone back since. Otis spent his days sitting in a second-hand armchair, staring at the blank wall, his spirit completely broken. He barely spoke. He just existed, a man hollowed out by regret. But Beatrice could not afford the luxury of despair. They had bills to pay, and without my money and without Marcus's schemes, they were destitute. So Beatrice Davis, the woman who had screamed that I was just a lowly secretary, the woman who had mocked my practical clothes and my work ethic, put on a blue uniform. It was a polyester smock that zipped up the front, the kind worn by the invisible workforce that cleaned the world while everyone else slept. She had taken a job as a night janitor at a mid-rise office building downtown. It was the only work she could find, with no references and a ruined reputation. Every night at 6 p.m. she took 2 buses to the city center. She pushed a heavy cart filled with cleaning supplies. She scrubbed toilets that were used by executives who looked right through her. She emptied trash cans filled with the remnants of lunches she could never afford. Her hands, once manicured and soft, became rough and chapped from the harsh chemicals. Her back ached constantly. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the humiliation. Every time she knelt to wipe a scuff mark off the floor, she remembered how she had looked down on me. She remembered telling me to get a real job. She remembered calling me a failure. Now she was cleaning up after people like me. It was a Tuesday evening, and the rain was lashing against the glass doors of the office lobby. Beatrice was mopping the marble floor, the gray water swirling in the bucket. She was tired down to her bones. Her shift was almost over, but she still had the executive suites on the top floor to finish. She took the service elevator up, the metal box rattling as it ascended. She pushed her cart down the silent hallway, the wheels squeaking on the plush carpet. She reached the waiting area outside the CEO's office. It was a beautiful space with leather chairs and a glass coffee table, arranged with fresh flowers and the latest business magazines. Beatrice began to empty the recycling bin. She moved mechanically, her mind numb. As she reached for a stack of papers to toss into her bag, something caught her eye. Lying on the coffee table was the newest issue of Forbes magazine. The cover was glossy and bright, illuminated by the soft, recessed lighting of the suite. Beatrice froze. Her hand hovered over the trash bag. She stared at the face on the cover. It was a face she knew better than her own. It was a face she had birthed, a face she had slapped, a face she had ignored. It was me. I was wearing a white power suit tailored to perfection. My hair was sleek and sharp. I was not smiling. I looked fierce. I looked unstoppable. I looked like a woman who owned the skyline behind me. The bold yellow text across the bottom of the cover read, "The Quiet Titan, Jasmine Davis, on forensic accounting, real estate, and building an empire from the shadows." Beneath that, in smaller text, "Young Entrepreneur of the Year." Beatrice dropped her trash bag. It hit the floor with a soft rustle. She reached out with a trembling hand and picked up the magazine. It felt heavy, expensive. She opened it. There was a 4-page spread. There were photos of my penthouse, photos of the commercial buildings I owned in Midtown, photos of me shaking hands with the mayor. The article detailed my rise from a modest background to a senior partner at a top firm. It talked about my investment strategy, my philanthropy, my ruthless efficiency in exposing corporate fraud. It estimated my net worth in the mid-8 figures. Beatrice read the words, her lips moving silently. She read about the daughter she had thrown away. She read about the wealth she had tried to steal pennies from, while millions were sitting right in front of her face. She read a quote from me in the second paragraph. "My success is built on self-reliance," I had told the interviewer. "I learned early on that you cannot depend on anyone to save you. Sometimes the people who are supposed to support you are the ones holding you back." Cutting that dead weight was the best business decision I ever made. Beatrice made a sound like a dying animal. It was a sob that started in her stomach and tore its way up her throat. She clutched the magazine to her chest, sinking down onto the plush carpet of the waiting area. She was surrounded by the trappings of wealth, the smell of leather and money, but she was just the janitor holding a picture of the life she could have shared. She rocked back and forth, tears streaming down her face, mixing with the smell of bleach on her uniform. She had traded a diamond for a piece of glass. She had thrown away a queen to protect a pawn. And now she was alone in the dark, scrubbing floors, while her daughter looked down on her from the cover of a magazine she could not even afford to buy. The elevator dinged down the hall, signaling the arrival of the morning security guard, but Beatrice did not move. She just sat there weeping over the glossy image of the daughter she had underestimated until it was too late. The realization washed over her, cold and absolute. She had not just lost a house. She had lost a legacy. And she knew with a terrifying certainty that I would never look back. The rain in Atlanta does not fall gently, it hammers against the earth like it is trying to wash the city clean of its sins. It was a Tuesday evening 3 weeks after the sentencing, and the sky had opened up, turning the streets of downtown into slick rivers of oil and reflection. Inside the cabin of my Audi, the world was silent and dry. The climate control was set to a perfect 70 degrees, and the only sound was the soft, rhythmic thumping of the wipers clearing away the deluge. I was driving down 10th Street, heading away from the office district, away from the skyscrapers where I made my fortune, and toward the open highway. The traffic light ahead turned red, and I eased the car to a stop. The rhythmic drumming of the rain intensified against the roof. I looked out the passenger window. I was stopped right next to a city bus shelter, a small plexiglass box that offered little protection against the driving wind. There was a woman standing inside, huddled into the corner, trying to shield herself from the spray of passing cars. She was wearing a thin plastic poncho over a blue custodial smock. Her shoes were worn sneakers soaked through to the socks. In one hand, she gripped a plastic bag from a discount grocery store, the kind that tears if you look at it wrong. I could see the outline of a loaf of generic bread and a carton of milk pressing against the thin material. She turned her head, looking for the bus headlights in the distance, and the street lamp illuminated her face. It was Beatrice. She looked 20 years older than she had just a few months ago. The arrogance was gone, scraped away by the harsh reality of survival. Her face was gaunt, the skin hanging loosely on her cheekbones. Her eyes, once sharp and judging, were dull and rimmed with red. She looked cold. She looked hungry. She looked like a woman who had lost everything and knew exactly whose fault it was. For a moment, time seemed to suspend itself. The rain blurred the world outside, but she was in sharp focus. I sat in my $100,000 machine encased in leather and steel, watching the woman who had birthed me shivering in the cold. I remembered the way she used to look at me across the dining room table, with that sneer of disappointment. I remembered her telling me I was selfish. I remembered her telling me to get out of her house. Beatrice looked down at the street. Her eyes swept over the line of cars stopped at the light. They glided over a taxi, over a delivery truck, and then they locked onto the Audi. She knew this car. She had seen it drive away the night the FBI raided her home. She had seen it on the cover of the magazine she had wept over. Her eyes widened. A spark of recognition flashed through the dullness. She stepped forward, moving out of the shelter and into the rain. She did not seem to notice the water soaking her face. She stared right at me through the tinted glass. I knew she could not see me clearly, but she knew I was there. She knew her daughter was sitting just 10 feet away, wrapped in the success she had tried to steal. Her hand came up slowly. It was a hesitant, trembling gesture. She was waving, or maybe she was reaching out. It was the movement of a drowning woman trying to catch a lifeline. Her lips moved. I could not hear her through the soundproof glass, but I knew the shape of the word she was saying. Jasmine. She took a step toward the curb, her face twisting into a mask of desperate hope. She thought I would roll down the window. She thought I would unlock the door. She thought that after everything, after the theft and the insults and the betrayal, that the bond of blood would still be strong enough to make me stop. She thought I was still the girl who craved her approval, who would do anything for a crumb of affection. She was wrong. I reached into the center console and pulled out my sunglasses. It was dark outside and the rain was heavy, but I put them on anyway. They were dark, oversized, and armored. They hid my eyes. They hid my soul. I turned my head forward, looking at the traffic light. It was still red, but I could see the cross traffic slowing down. I gripped the steering wheel, the leather warm under my palms. I did not look at her again. I did not acknowledge the woman standing in the rain, begging for a salvation she did not deserve. The light turned green. I pressed my foot down on the accelerator. The twin-turbo engine roared, a deep, guttural sound of power and finality. The car surged forward, the tires kicking up a spray of dirty rainwater that splashed onto the curb, soaking the hem of Beatrice's blue smock. I did not check the rearview mirror. I did not need to see her shoulders slump. I did not need to see her watch the taillights fade into the storm. I knew she was still standing there alone, waiting for a bus that would take her back to a damp studio apartment and a life of regret. As the city skyline receded behind me, a voiceover played in my mind, narrating the closing chapter of a long and painful book. It was my own voice, calm and assured. My mother once told me that if I thought I was smart enough to look down on them, I should pay my own bills. She meant it as a threat. She meant to cripple me with the weight of responsibility. She wanted me to learn that the world was hard and that I needed them to survive. She wanted me to pay a price for my independence. Well, I paid it. I paid every cent. I paid in sleepless nights. I paid in years of silence. I paid in the heartbreak of realizing that the people who were supposed to love me only loved what I could do for them. They wanted me to pay for my intelligence. They wanted me to pay for my success. So I did. The price of my freedom was them. It cost me a mother, a father, a brother. It cost me the illusion of a family. It was expensive. It was painful. But as I drive away from the wreckage of their lives, I realize the truth. It was the biggest bargain of my life. I got the better end of the deal. I traded a liability for an asset. I traded a cage for the sky. I looked over at the passenger seat. Damon was sitting there looking out at the passing lights. He had been with me at the final closing of the Magnolia Street sale. He had stood by me when the judge read the sentencing. He had never asked for anything other than my trust, and he had earned it 10 times over. He felt my gaze and turned to look at me. He did not say anything. He did not ask about the woman at the bus stop. He just reached out and covered my hand on the gear shift. His grip was warm and solid. It was the touch of an equal. It was the touch of someone who saw me not as a bank account, but as a woman who had walked through fire and come out made of gold. I interlaced my fingers with his. I squeezed his hand. "Where to?" he asked, his voice low and steady. "Anywhere," I said. "Everywhere." The rain was stopping now. The clouds were breaking apart, revealing a sliver of the moon. The road ahead was open and wide, stretching out into the darkness, leading to a future that belonged only to me. I pressed the gas pedal a little harder, driving into the night, driving toward the dawn, driving away from the ghosts of Magnolia Street, and into the beautiful, terrifying silence of my own freedom. This story teaches us a powerful lesson about self-worth. Shared DNA is never a license for abuse. For years, Jasmine paid for affection that never existed, learning the hard way that you cannot buy respect from those committed to using you. True freedom arrives only when we realize that family is defined by behavior, not bloodlines. Setting boundaries isn't an act of cruelty, it is a necessary act of survival. The price of your peace may be high, but it is the only investment that guarantees a return. You must be willing to walk away to truly find yourself. If you believe that your peace is worth more than toxic loyalty, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of justice and resilience.